Boom, 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 boom. Do, 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 do.
Have you seen
Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. Let me. Sorry, I'm just adjusting my settings. We got two non-believers in the chat. Welcome. I'm gonna drop a Discord link if anyone wants to join. Let's see. Let's make that 3,000. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. In the meantime, I'll just be doing a little reading here. But I do have actually. Let's pull them up so we're ready. If anybody wants to discuss. Go ahead and join that Discord. And in the meantime, we're gonna do. Let's make it the debate version. Actually, should we respond to some of these commenters live? People are so interesting. Okay. Seems like these guys are working it out themselves. Atheism relates to the psychological state of not being convinced by the claim that God exists. Lack of belief is not a propositional claim. It simply reflects a person's mental state regarding belief. Gnostic atheists, on the other hand, do make a positive claim that God does not exist and therefore bear the burden of proof. Okay. But bang. No propositional claims. Okay. So my response, I agree that not all atheists make the Gnostic atheist claim, but lack of belief does not mean that you make no propositional claims. The point being, if you are not convinced that God exists, what are you convinced by? Or do you claim total epistemic agnosticism, the idea that you actually don't know anything to be propositionally true? Seems if you're not convinced that God is if you're not convinced to believe in God, then you must be convinced of some other worldview. Okay, we'll throw that out there, see how anybody likes that. Cool. If you say God doesn't exist, you do have a burden of proof. Pink farting unicorn. All right. Those are dealt with for now.
If tomorrow morning, immediately after breakfast, suddenly there was an earthquake, and a silvery light shone in the sky, and the leaves dropped from the trees, and I dashed outside, and there, towering over us like 100 Everest, was this giant figure with lightning playing around his Michelangeloid face, and he pointed down and saying, "Be assured, Keith M. Parsons, that I do in fact exist, and I'm sick of your logic chopping." Dr. Craig, I would join you in the pew of the church, in the front pew of the church the next Sunday.
Be going to the question and answer period. We're going to go to the question and answer period, so be going to the microphone as we wind this down.
You don't think that you would have said, "Boy, I was having a hallucination."
Here's a fascinating debate between atheist philosopher Keith Parson and William Lane Craig on the resurrection of Christ. William Lane Craig presents his case.
How you doing, brother? How you doing? I'm early today because I got to leave early today, unfortunately. Gotta leave by like 1:30, pretty much at the latest. But yeah, I got a. It's not a show, but it's a cool mic, and it's at a little club here in LA that I am the door guy at. So, got to get over there. Where are you at? What part of the country are you at again? Like, what time is it for you right now? What's the schedule? It's like 3 mics. The first one starts at like 4. Then the next one's like 6:37. I'm at my time's on PST. I'm in Los Angeles. But you know, I like to, because I also perform on the mic, so I like to like write a new set. I'd write a new 5 minutes every week. So I like to have some time to do that. Take a shower, get ready. LA Evangelist, currently 1:52. All right, so you're like mountain time or whatever. Middle of the country type beat. Cool. Good shit. The LA Evangelist. I like it. I like it. This might be a bad video because it's like AI voice. I don't know. What do you want to talk about, Comic Brandon? What you got in your mind? Today the topic is the resurrection of Jesus is real. Can I presume that you don't believe that the resurrection of Jesus was a real historical event? Is that a proper assumption?
Study during my doctorate. Good evening. I want to say how grateful I am for the invitation to participate in tonight's debate. I've really been looking forward to discussing the issues with Dr. Ehrman this evening. In preparing for this debate, I had quite a surprise. I was amazed to discover how much our life stories are alike. As slightly marginalized teenage boys with some passing acquaintance with Christianity, both of our lives were turned upside down when at the age of 15 or 16, we each experienced a spiritual rebirth through personal faith in Christ. Eager to serve Him, we both attended the same college in Illinois, Wheaton College, where we both even studied Greek under the same professor. After graduation, we both went on to pursue doctoral studies. Thereafter, our paths radically diverged. I received a fellowship from the German government to study the resurrection of Jesus under the direction of Wolfhard Pannenberg and Ferdinand Hahn at the University of Munich and at Cambridge University. As a result of my studies, I became even more convinced of the historical credibility of that event. Now, of course, ever since my conversion, I had believed in the resurrection of Jesus on the basis of my personal experience, and I still think that.
Let me make sure I'm not getting a copyright strike real quick. That happened before. I shouldn't on this video, but who knows. Okay, looks like I'm not. That's good.
This experiential approach to the resurrection is a perfectly valid way to knowing that Christ is risen. It's the way that most Christians today know that Jesus is risen and alive. But as a result of my studies, I came to see that a remarkably good case can be made for Jesus' resurrection historically as well. And I hope to show tonight that the resurrection of Jesus is the best explanation of certain well-established facts about Jesus. Sadly, Dr. Ehrman came to radically different conclusions as a result of his studies. In his most recent book, he poignantly describes how he came to lose his teenage faith. I'm not sure, based on Dr. Ehrman's writings, whether he still believes in Jesus' resurrection or not. He never denies it, but he does deny that there can be historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection.
What do you think, Brandon? Is it possible for there to be historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection, or is that impossible? And also, I'm curious, did you ever believe before and then change your mind? Or have you always sort of had this view that you currently have? Let me know. I'm curious. I certainly think, I mean, obviously it's possible, but even if I was to take the sort of worldview that I don't believe it happened, I think I would still have to say it's possible for there to be evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Just because I don't see why. It's not logically impossible. It's not logically inconsistent. If it did happen, there would be evidence, even if I didn't believe it happened. What's up, Numenon? What's up, brother? Any interest in joining the Discord there, Numenon? We can have a little personal interaction. Feel free. Oh, we got Infamous in the Discord. Welcome, brother.
What's up?
What's up, my friend? Yeah, I should probably stream.
I watched that Matt Dillahunty Jay Dyer video in full.
Oh, you did? How'd it turn out?
So, I mean, towards the end, Matt he can only repeat himself so much. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he kind of like fumbles at the end trying to get it in different words.
Okay.
I truly believe Jay Dyer just doesn't view, like, he says that the transcendentals are different than regular, like, everyday skepticism can deal with, but he never substantiates that claim. He just says they are different. And Matt constantly is like,
I've heard him
"Cool,
substantiate that claim. Because the difference is that the difference is that they're presupposed. So if he didn't do it in the debate, then fine. But I think it's pretty obvious what the differences between the transcendentals and like any other argument.
No. It's true that they're different. I agree they're different. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the same way that two animals are different, that doesn't matter if we're talking about mammals and both of them are mammals.
Okay. Fair enough.
Like it depends. It depends on the category that we're talking on. So unless you can prove that the difference is relevant to the topic, it doesn't matter, right? So, like, for instance, the transcendentals have different words in them than the rest of everything else. But I don't think you would agree that that's relevant.
No, I don't think that's relevant. I think the relevant difference is that you need them to talk about anything else. So they're presupposed. That's the relevant difference.
Right, but you need any given thing to talk about that thing as well, right? So it's not that it's not necessarily a difference, but is it a relevant difference? So when we're talking about relevancy, it's basically, do they need a cause?
Right.
And I don't think saying they're different in any way substantiates that they need a cause.
Says that they need a cause. Yeah, in that sense, that would just be a way that they're the same as other things, that they need a cause.
Yeah, if anything, yeah. And so, actually, yeah, that's a good point. I guess if they were different, they wouldn't need a cause, which means that they're just presupposed, which would be Matt's position. But,
right.
Yeah, I mean, essentially said the same thing that me and you said for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that. I think Dillahunty, I don't know what happened to his mind, but, well, I actually have a little treat video, kind of a funny one. Which is, wait, hold on. Numenon has a comment here. Relating to the Dilla Monkey debate, we should discuss why proving your reasoning works is relevant. We should discuss why proving your reasoning works is relevant. I think part of the thing is that we have to presuppose that our reasoning works at all. In fact,
proving why the universe exists doesn't matter to whether or not it works. Proving that they need a cause doesn't work for whether or not they work, which is the whole thing about breaking down the world. That's my thing.
Yeah, and so then Numenon says, basically the idea is that you must give an account of why your reasoning is reliable. I agree that you should. I think it's more elegant, a better worldview to have an account for why your reasoning is reliable.
I don't think it is because
I just don't think we can prove it per se. But much like we can't prove many of the most fundamental beliefs that we should and do hold.
Well, it matters that it has explanatory power, right? And God has no explanatory power.
No, God has all the explanatory power.
Right, but if you have all the explanatory power, you have no explanatory power. If you can explain everything but have no explanation, if you can explain everything but have no explanation, you have no explanatory power. It's like saying magic is the answer. It's okay. You haven't really answered the question.
Yeah, but what if magic actually is the answer? I mean, then if you say you can't say magic is the answer, but it actually is the answer, then you are the one with no explanatory power.
No, because it doesn't have any explanatory power. It's an answer. Those are different.
Okay, I see what you're saying, but yeah.
Like
so
if I can explain how something happened, that's not the same as saying it happened because of this one thing. Like if I said the reason that you woke up this morning was because you, I don't know, were scared by something.
Yeah.
Right. But then you want to be like, okay, but what was that thing? Right. And then I'm just like, oh, it's magic. Right. Then it has no explanatory power. It doesn't explain anything.
Okay. I don't understand the relevance of that. That actually would be an explanation. If a literal ghost woke me up and I said I was scared by the ghost, so I woke up, and then I said the ghost, which is, I mean, if you consider that to be magic or whatever, scared me, therefore waking me up, that would explain why I was scared and also why I woke up.
No, it's not about explaining the situation. It's about explaining as a thing. So like it is sufficient to explain everything, right? Magic is sufficient to explain anything. I could give you any problem in the world, and you could say the answer is magic, and it's an unfalsifiable thing.
Sure.
So the answer can be magic. It's sufficient, right? But it doesn't explain anything.
Right. Okay. So you just want a different type of explanation, or you want one that's falsifiable. I understand. Empirical is what you want.
Well, I mean, it would be nice if it was falsifiable. If it was unfalsifiable, then it can't be proven. But like, I mean, that's a separate issue to God and magic. But it having no explanatory power is a part of it being unfalsifiable. But also, there's nothing beyond it that explains it. It doesn't have any.
Well, it can explain
answers.
It's a necessary being is one that exists in all universes at all times in all possible situations, and so the explanatory power of it is its quality of necessity. Is itself.
Yeah, but see, okay, so now we're talking about necessity.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the proper, like, this is the thing, is that, like, once again, I don't believe in modality, but
right.
The whole thing with it being necessary is that, like, something exists, right? The definition of nothing is self-defeating, therefore something must exist.
Right.
That's all you need for necessity. There's nothing about a being, there's nothing about an agent.
Like, yeah, but then it's like once there is necessary existence, which you agree with, it sounds like. Do you agree that there is a necessary existence? Because nothing is self-defeating. Okay, then you start to say, well,
I think the necessary existence is the mind, right? It needs to exist.
Right, and so
I don't know what else exists.
Well, that is interesting that you would say the necessary existence is the mind, right? Okay, so the human mind?
Well, yeah, my mind.
Your mind. But what about the laws of logic, which we presume to be?
I don't know.
Okay, so those don't need explanatory power. Those don't need any. Those don't have any necessary existence.
No, that's not what I said. Mm-hmm. I said I know that I'm necessarily existent because I is in the first sentence. It must be the case. Yeah. And then everything outside of that, I can't know with the same level of certainty.
No, certainly
Except
not.
Maybe like
certainly not with the same level of certainty. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about knowing anything at all and constructing a worldview. And so and I think you realize, you know that. If you just stopped at I think therefore I am, then that would not be you couldn't even hold that worldview pragmatically.
Also, if you say I think therefore I am, it presupposes the laws of identity and rationality. All of those, I can't be myself and so both not myself.
Yeah.
Like it presupposes all those in the thing, but it is a necessary intertwining of the presupposition. So if one thing is true, it presupposes the other things.
Yeah.
Then that means it must be either from myself or myself comes from them.
Right.
Or they exist simultaneously.
Sure. Yeah. And so I don't understand why we wouldn't presume a grounding for those things.
Well, we wouldn't presume anything because we have no proof of the thing.
Well, you don't, so that you wouldn't presume the laws of logic or your rational faculties or anything? You don't have proof of those.
Well, so I think that the laws of logic can be proved by the fact that I think, therefore I am, includes logic in it. So, like, the self clearly exists. Whether or not our like experiences correlate to itself is different than the fact that you exist. the properties of you are separate from whether or not the you exists.
But like you said,
And
if you
so
don't presume the
you
laws
has
of
the law
logic,
identity.
yeah.
Well, you has the laws of identity, non-contradiction, perhaps excluded middle. That can be debated, but like it includes those in the sentence.
Okay. Yeah, but just because it includes because it includes them in the sentence, and that's what you're talking about, words and meaning and things like that, they are presumed prior to the sentence even being like at all reasonable or rational or having any.
I use the words to correlate my ideas. It doesn't mean that they mean something to you that they mean to me.
Okay, let's get Newman on in here and see what he's got going on.
Here, 1 second. I have to go for a second. So.
We'll talk to Newman on for a sec. Real human being. All right. Well, go ahead and join that if you so desire, Mr. Real Human Being. Oh, you're in the chat. Oh, right, because you have people sleeping and stuff, I'm sure. Hello, are you a physicalist, Infamous? Sorry if that's too direct. Also, it's nice to be here. I'm glad you're here, brother. Welcome, welcome. He doesn't use VC. Gotcha. So I don't think Infamous can be a physicalist based on the way he speaks about necessary being. And even the self, but by physicalist, do you mean a naturalist, or what exactly? Actually, spell out what you mean exactly by physicalist. I know Infamous isn't at the mic right now, so when he comes back, we'll sort of present this as a package.
I'm not.
Yeah, no problem, no rush. Yeah, explain what you mean by that, real human being. Curious. Because I don't think it's logical to be a physical. I think it's actually self-defeating to be a. By physicalism, I mean the idea that everything that exists is observable by the senses. Interesting.
I mean, if by everything that exists, you mean that, everything that we've discovered to exist is by the senses, so kind of.
That's a good question, actually. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to think of something that you could not observe by the senses. I was going to say like quarks or something, but actually even those we've observed by the senses through instruments that we've built by our senses and interact with through our senses and things like that. Like only physical things exist, and physical things are those that exist within the senses. Got you. That's a good question. Physical. I mean, certainly, like, and does that counts, I guess, like, wave states and stuff like that, like, right, the empiricist position, right. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I certainly don't believe that, obviously, as a theist and a Christian.
Can I be heard?
Yes, you can. Even better now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So everything that we can observe necessarily must be observable by us. So
well, yeah.
I think
the question is there anything
but
unobservable by us?
Is there things that we can't observe? I would say it's almost a certainty. It's called the knowledge paradox, right?
Yep.
Is there something that you know is probably not true?
Is there something that I know is probably not true? I mean, probably.
Right.
Yeah,
like
sure.
Something, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Can you tell me what it is?
No. I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah.
Is there something that I think that we can't sense? Probably. Can I tell you what it is? No.
Interesting. And then but you don't rule out the possibility that thing could be like a spirit or a god or a spiritual realm or something like that.
I mean, yeah, it's a falsifiable claim. I don't know.
Well, as long as you don't rule it out, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, in my view.
Well, I mean, unless it's demonstrated to be impossible. Like if you said, "Oh, there's a ghost that's shaped like a square circle," yeah, he doesn't fucking exist.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, we got some typing going on by Real Human Being. Yeah, I feel like the typical atheist, agnostic, empiricist view is that there's sort of only physicality or like
I think he means materialist.
Yeah, materialist is another word that I usually use, or naturalist is a good one too, because it allows you to take the sort of like, I don't know, it allows you to examine like sort of the weird quantum stuff and whatever, and just say like,
Also, naturalist and materialist are really the same though,
or something. What's that?
Naturalism and materialism aren't the same, because materialism thinks that everything is rooted in like material, like literal, like actual matter. But naturalism doesn't say that. Like even abstract things can be a part of the material world. Like not the material world. Abstract things can be a part of the natural
world. Yeah.
Like the laws of logic can be separate from the mind, for instance, but still be part of like the universe.
Right, yeah, that's why I usually talk about naturalism. Real human being here is going to say physicalism includes materialism and naturalism.
Physicalism? I mean, I don't know how. They're like contradictory beliefs.
Well, it seems like materialism is like a subset of naturalism, or where, like, you know, materialism is like a smaller circle within naturalism, and maybe he's saying naturalism and materialism are smaller circles within physicalism, perhaps?
I guess.
Maybe. I don't know. I've not heard of physicalism, so it's interesting. Definitely interested in spelling it out.
The doctrine that the real world consists of simply of the physical world. Yeah, this is just materialism.
Yeah, kind of sounds like materialism. Oh, we got some stuff in the other chat. Boom. The need to assume what other people are thinking to reconcile your own insanity. Interesting.
The need to reconcile...
I don't know what that... I think
my own insanity.
I don't know what Brandon's talking about.
There's a type of physicalism. Naturalism is considered synonymous with naturalism. Wait. Well, yes, naturalism would be considered synonymous with naturalism. They're the same word. But I might have bad definitions here.
I think he's saying physicalism is considered synonymous with naturalism, probably.
Colloquially, sure. Yeah, I mean, colloquially, yeah.
No, it makes sense.
Like... But, like... If we do get back into what we were talking about with the Matt Dillahunty video, like Matt just like he kind of broke down after repeating himself like so many times, but like the real disconnect was that like Matt was like, I don't know if they need a justification. They could just be. You believe in things that can just be, so therefore I don't know if they need a justification, even taking on your worldview.
Yeah, but if you actually took on his worldview, then God has a
he meant up to his stance because he believes in God.
Necessity, yeah. And so...
What does Matt mean by justification? Something that is the reason for their existence.
Right. And so, really, Matt's worldview is these things could possibly have no justification. They could be brute facts.
Well, no, that's not what he's saying either, right? That's a truth claim about possibility. He's not even saying that.
He's just saying,
I just don't know if they need one.
But if you don't know if they need one, then they either could have one or they don't, or they could not have one. That's what that means.
Well, no, because we saw this in the Cy Burdenkamp video. Like, that's not what that means. Saying that you don't know something to be true doesn't mean it's possible or impossible.
Well, those aren't they mutually exhaustive, possible or impossible?
Right, but it doesn't mean you have any claim about it. For instance, the gumball analogy, right?
But...
Do you believe that the number is even or odd?
Yeah, no. I understand what you're saying, but I believe it's either even or odd. Matt Hunt.
That you're right. That is the case, but I don't have any true statement about either.
Yeah. And I'm just saying Matt Dillahunty is acknowledging that it's possible for them to be unjustified because it's either justified or unjustified. I mean, I don't see how you're not.
Like, okay, in the gumball analogy, it's literally they are either odd or they are either odd or even. That's just the case, right?
Yes.
I don't believe they're odd. I don't believe they're even. I don't believe they're possible. I don't believe it's impossible. I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. But you believe. Answer this, yes or no. Do you believe that it is either odd or even?
That it is either odd or even?
Yes.
Yeah, they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I just said about Matt.
But you said he believes
it's either
possible.
Justified or unjustified. He doesn't know.
Because you said he believes it's possible, and that's not what he believes.
Okay, fine. He believes it's either justified or unjustified.
Yeah, either is the case or is not the case.
Right, so it's just this kind of like vacuous, like empty statement that could describe basically anything you want. Like it could describe gumballs as well as the laws of the universe. And
right, but it's not a true
like
statement.
Jay Dyer is going to take a stance like, I believe it's justified. And there's no real counter argument to that, and it makes more sense for something to be justified rather than unjustified to me.
So two things. One, there is a counter argument to it, which is how the fuck do you know? And two, the other thing about it just makes more sense if they're all justified. Yeah, because everything is usually justified.
Right.
How do you know that that's the case here?
I don't know, but I'll take on
There you
other
go.
things. Like we were watching a video actually, and the title of the stream today is "The Resurrection of Jesus is Real."
Oh God.
Changed my mind, right? So the resurrection of Jesus as a historical event. Now, to me, if that single historical event happened, then we start to see why you would prefer justification of, natural law. Why you would start to infer God as an explanation.
Even if he raised from the dead, it doesn't prove God.
Yeah, I think it would. Well, it wouldn't. I guess it wouldn't prove God.
Even if he raised from the dead and I saw it myself, it wouldn't say anything about God.
Oh, it would definitely say. I think it would say something about God. Why? Well, explain that. Why would you say that wouldn't say anything about God if someone raised from the dead?
Okay. Well, because we haven't determined how he raised from the dead.
But what if he said over and over again, "I'm the Son of God. I'm gonna rise from the dead. I'm gonna give you the sign of Jonah."
I don't care what he said until I can prove it.
So you witness someone rise from the dead.
What if they said nothing?
It doesn't give their claims more metaphysical truth?
No. It depends on the claims. Like, I am a square circle, well...
Right, but that's clearly not what he said. He just said, "I'm going to rise from the dead."
I think he said something as equally... Well, he didn't say, "I'm going to rise from the dead." He just never said that.
Yes, he did.
He never said, "I am going to rise from the dead."
It's almost impossible to read the gospel and not take that message out of the predictions.
Well, yeah, after he rose from the dead, sure.
No, even beforehand. It's just super clear. But no one could possibly expect that at the time.
Well, they knew that it was some kind of sacrifice, but they definitely didn't know that he was going to die. They thought he was God. It was sacrilege to even think that.
Yeah. They didn't think he was going to die. I don't even know. I don't know if they thought he was even supposed to be a sacrifice in that sense. Although if they had read Isaiah,
I mean, John the Baptist clearly, like, he is. It's very implied that he's like the,
John the Baptist
sacrificial
calls him the Lamb
like,
of God. John the Baptist is he is the greatest of men, but still the least in the kingdom of heaven, which is interesting.
But make him fight Job right now.
I watched a great video breaking down Job, which maybe we'll talk about at some point, or that might be a topic for a different stream. But sure. Job is so interesting as a character. And there's a big misunderstanding about him, which is cool. Okay, wait, let's read what Real Human Being said. Also, you believe the transcendentals. You believe that your reasoning is reliable. It would be self-refuting to deny. So why couldn't we just all be schizophrenics? Prove it. I think that's where Jay was coming from. To be fair,
he can't. It's a problem of hard solipsism.
Right.
No one can.
Right. And Jay admits that he can't either. I was watching a different debate of his.
Yeah, he admits that too. I found that, which I was like, cool.
Yeah.
You think you can? Let's hear it, bro. I'm gonna steal the fuck out of your idea.
I'm interested, Real Human Being, how you believe that we can defeat the problem of hard solipsism. I also believe that, and to be clear, I think Infamous believes that solipsism is not true, but you sort of have to presume that is what the...
I think the terminology is hard solipsism isn't true. Solipsism is unfalsifiable.
Okay.
And we have to presume hard solipsism isn't true, to be very clear.
Right. Right, yeah, I do think you have to presume hard solipsism not to be true to do anything.
But it is true, we don't believe it.
And we don't believe it, yeah. To be fair, I think the resurrection can prove God to a consistent naturalist. Maybe there's a naturalistic explanation. Yeah, that's kind of what I was taking it from. Like, if you're a naturalist, which I realize you're not, Infamous, but if you were, then I think the resurrection would give you really any of the miracles would give you...
Well, I mean, the parting of the Red Sea is more powerful to me than raising from the dead, but yeah.
Yeah, I actually saw an interesting point about that. It's like, well, why is the resurrection so special? It was an Alex O'Connor clip, actually. Maybe
where everyone rose from the graves after Jesus rose? Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
That, and then he said, well, isn't turning water to wine just as miraculous or even more than, like, rising from the dead? Given that everyone, Jesus raised Lazarus and this little girl and all the saints and all that stuff. And the response was,
yeah, I mean, it's more rare. I don't think if it's more miraculous. I think they're equally as miraculous. You're literally changing the foundations of reality to suit your needs. In fact, depending on how much chemistry needs to be changed for you to come alive again, I'd say it actually is the resurrection.
Sure. And then the other guy's response was, well, the prediction by Isaiah and the prediction by Jesus himself gives it this added level of, like,
I think those are their own miracles, right? Like the prophecies are their own. Yeah. The prophecies are their own miracles. I don't think they give credence to other miracles.
And then also the language is pretty specific that God raises Jesus from the dead. Obviously, Jesus is God, but God raises Jesus from the dead. So if
isn't it the winds of the Spirit or something? I thought that's what the language was.
I think all of these things. I mean, there's probably a few different ways that it's described, and we could look at that.
It's probably a different verse.
But the act of raising Jesus from the dead by God is a confirmation by God that he's not some sort of false Messiah or some sort of...
Well, sure, if we're going to presume that God rose him from the dead, God's kind of the first word in the sentence, like...
Mm-hmm.
But if Jesus was in front of me, died, presumably, from what everyone saw, and then I saw him walking around right next to Mary Magdalene, like... I still wouldn't say anything about a God. Like I would still not have proof that a God exists.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I guess it wouldn't. I guess it wouldn't be
solipsism.
I don't know. I guess it wouldn't be solid.
It would be evidence, maybe.
Yeah, it would be like, to me, it would be like the strongest form of evidence that you could possibly imagine.
Well, like what if we just discover that like he wasn't actually dead, et cetera, right? Like that's still a possibility in my mind when I see that, right? Because I'm not a fucking doctor. I didn't examine the body before.
Well, but if you saw, but imagine the actual situation where you see him get crucified by the Romans, and they're extremely thorough and brutal, and it's like,
I mean, they didn't stab him through the fucking heart or the head or anything.
They did stab him in the liver though, and then blood and water pours out.
I know. I'm Irish, man. I know a few fellas with some fucked up livers that still walking
around. No, I mean, I think it's pretty well accepted that the Romans killed Jesus in biblical scholarship.
I mean, we have no idea, though.
Historical scholarship, but
we have no idea, though. Like, we don't even know who like checked out the body afterwards, or if it was checked out, they just fucking buried it. Well, they didn't bury it; they put it behind a rock.
I mean, I can pull up the Wes Huff video on this, but you could not possibly be crucified for the Romans and then live for 3 days without any medical attention.
Who says he didn't get medical attention?
Well, he didn't. I mean, then the other historical evidence is for the tomb and the empty tomb, and there's independent scholarship for the Joseph of Arimathea putting him in the tomb. And so if he got put in the tomb after he died, then he's in that tomb for 3 days with this giant stone rolled in front of it. I mean, where's the medical attention? Unless he gets it from God.
The stone
I guess unless he gets it from God. What's that?
Wasn't the stone definitely like rolled off when they went to the tomb?
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
But they had Romans guarding the tomb. So
where were they when Mary Magdalene got
2
there?
days or whatever. What's that? Not when Mary Magdalene got there.
Yeah, they weren't there. Like, we don't know when they left.
I'm actually sure.
Also,
I think they were there. Actually, I'm pretty sure they were. But anyway, I don't know.
We can read about that.
We can read about it. Okay, so the way you combat
solipsism.
Yeah, go.
From what I understand, is that solipsism would entail the possibility that you couldn't recognize contradictions accurately. Thus, it would be self-refuting, and then you would need to assume a worldview where your solipsistic scenarios are impossible. It's like to... Oh, so to be very clear, solipsism is not the idea that we don't exist, right? The self exists, which proves the law of identity, most of the laws of logic, right? The laws of logic are intertwined with I think, therefore I am. The idea is... our senses can't prove anything. That's solipsism, right? You could be in the Matrix, for instance, right? And it's an unfalsifiable claim, so you can't, like an eternal dream, you can't disprove it. It's impossible, right? So you can still logic, you can still reason, you can still be, but it doesn't disprove solipsism.
Right. But what you pointed out, what you wrote, Real Human Being, is a good point, that it makes zero sense. If you actually assume that worldview, then it is self-refuting. I mean, it's absurd to assume that, to presume.
I don't want to dogpile on Infamous. I love just a normal conversation.
Oh no, I want to dogpile on Infamous. Usually I get dogpiled on.
Hey, that's not my fault. People come in here and help me. That's not my fault. I know. Get more Christians in here, buddy. I'll take them on.
The stream the way I title it, honestly. But
I've debated like 6 Christians at the same time. Well, actually, no. One of them was so it was more of a domino effect. One of them was a flat earther, and when I found that out, they dogpiled him. But
okay, that's good. That's good. Most Christians are not flat earthers, which is, but
most flat earthers are Christians.
Flat earthers are Christians. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I wonder why that would be. It's because most flat earthers are from the evangelical South, for sure.
Well, it's because they take the four corners, the firmament, and shit like that, and like use that to prove it.
Such a horrible misreading of that.
I actually think that it is an actual cosmology described in like the actual book. Like it does describe an actual cosmology. You can actually draw what it's talking about. It's not like metaphorical.
You could do.
Or like
yeah,
like you can actually draw shit out, and like maybe that's not how it is. Maybe that's just how he understood it. But like he absolutely describes the world as flat.
I'm not even sure he actually. I'm not actually sure they actually understood it to be a literal cosmology back then. I mean, obviously they didn't have the word cosmology. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't even know if they took it to be a description of like literal reality back then. And I can go to Origin, and this is much farther than the ancient Jews, but even Origin in the year like 250 or like 300, with one of the absolute first church fathers points out the absurdity of trees growing before like the sun.
Before the sun exists.
Yeah, before the sun existed. And so that's the early church father. I'm pretty sure the Talmudic rabbis were smart enough to also realize that. And so there was no sense in which it was meant to be taken literally, that this was a description of how reality plays out. And so
they absolutely could believe that because they believed God was magic.
Well, God is magic. I believe that.
Yeah,
I think everyone believes that. No.
I mean, I don't even think it's a good, like, I think it's a good bit of evidence when you have the actual events that happened, right? Like, we know what happened when the earth was formed, right? That's where you go, that's not how it happened. But when they didn't have evidence for that and how the world formed, they could absolutely just say, well, he created plants, and even though we don't know that plants feed off the sun, he then created the sun, and he can do that because he's God.
Sure. I think you could do that. I just think it would be... That's the weakest form of reading the Bible.
I mean, it's definitely what they thought at some point. I think you would agree.
Yeah, probably it's what they thought at some point. But in terms of Christian theology and reading of that passage, the very first church father already disagrees with that reading, and so then everything follows from that. So in terms of Christians, I'm not sure if they ever really. I mean, until
you'd have to think that the apostles were definitely Christians, but
what's that?
I mean, you'd have to think that the apostles were definitely Christians, and people back then absolutely believed the earth was flat. There's not a chance.
No. People knew the earth was round from like 500 BC, and then that knowledge somehow got lost or distorted and converted.
Well, yeah, but that was like individual people. Like, that was like individual people in writings. Like, no one believed them.
Yeah, they might not have been able to read that or know that. Yeah, and the apostles...
Also, just to get back to real human being.
Yeah, let's go back to that.
Because we kind of left him. I think that any act of proving something assumes that you can recognize contradictions. So I'd argue that solipsism would allow for the possibility that you can't recognize contradictions, but it doesn't, because it assumes I, which means identity, which means non-contradiction. So you can assume, so even in solipsism, you can use the laws of logic and still be in the matrix, right? Like, think about it. Like, if you're in the matrix, you can still reason. You're just also living in a dream world.
Wait, but yeah, his point, I think, is that that could even be a deception, the law of identity or something. When you say, just because you say I or whatever, I think, therefore I am, doesn't mean you're not being deceived in that statement.
I think, therefore I am means that there's an experiencer. There's absolutely an experiencer.
Well, according to the deceiver.
How can the deceiver make an experiencer without there actually being an experiencer? That would be a logical contradiction.
Well, exactly, and I think the point is that you couldn't even say that logical contradictions are invalid given this dynamic.
I mean, if the self isn't true, sure, but we haven't defeated solipsism. We've made super solipsism, if that's the case.
Right. Wait. So what? But could an evil deceiver make you think that there is a contradiction when there isn't one? If so, any appeal to the law of non-contradiction is invalid.
I mean, no, that's absolutely... So just because you can be convinced of something that isn't true doesn't mean that there isn't some kind of reasonable framework that isn't true. Like, for instance, the book that Streets was reading, where the devil uses reason and logic as a tool, but he's actually like a feral beast. Right? Just because he convinces you of something and a certain set of truths to get you to a conclusion doesn't mean the conclusion is correct.
Right.
or that the way to get there is the real way to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see the defeater for solipsism in and of itself. Obviously, I don't believe in it, but and this is a good reason not to believe in it, though. That it starts to bring into question even the laws of logic, even though you're saying that it doesn't.
Well, I mean, it absolutely doesn't, because the experiencer just means you can't prove what the experience is, but the experiencer has an identity.
But what if the experiencer lives in this like totally contradictory, square circle world or whatever, and then the deception is logic. The deception is like order.
You'd have to prove that it was somehow a deception.
Well, no, you don't have to prove it. You just have to.
Because if they're deceived, then the self doesn't exist and none of this starts.
Right, and so that's the idea. It's like, well, then if you're creating this worldview where there is no self or anything like that, where we even have to question the laws of logic, then again, I'm not sure.
But there absolutely is a self.
Defeats it. Well, just because you say there is.
Well, there has to be, right? The act of thinking about the thing makes it so that it instantiates it. It's not even a circular argument. It's every time you consider the question, you demonstrate the conclusion.
Worldview. Okay, let's try this. Worldview X entails the possibility of an evil deceiver that could distort your ability to recognize contradictions accurately. 2, that's self-refuting. So let's make sure that's self-refuting.
Okay, the worldview X entails the possibility of an evil deceiver that can distort your ability to recognize contradictions. But again, my ability to recognize contradictions isn't the idea that contradictions actually exist. Like, again, you can convince me the sky is green. It's not green. And also, I'm pretty sure saying a contradiction that isn't a contradiction, or saying a non-contradiction that is a contradiction, is a contradiction.
It's distorted your ability to recognize contradictions at all.
Sure, but my ability to recognize those things is independent of those things.
Well, according to the deceiver, given this worldview.
Okay.
So that does seem self-refuting. Hold on.
Right, but the premise 1 is self-refuting.
Right.
Also, okay, let's say that the laws of logic now don't exist. The deceiver has no identity, so he doesn't exist.
According to him.
Yeah, so like the argument is self-defeating. Like it's like he doesn't exist.
I agree. I mean, I think I as far as I'm aware, there's absolutely no defeater for the problem of hard solipsism. And also, I don't think it's true.
I'm not denying that you can recognize contradiction. Well, I mean, I'm perfectly okay with you saying that we can't. Like even if we can't, I just don't think that does anything to reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like the self could not recognize that it's the self, but it still exists.
Yeah. Interesting.
Actually, I don't know if you can do that. Can the self recognize that it's not self? I don't know if you can do that. I guess if it was brain dead.
If there were no self, then
well, not if there were no self, but can it recognize that it can it not recognize it exists? And I don't think
sure.
so.
I think probably.
Because when you say does it do X, it's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an internal critique of the worldview, leaves the door open for evil deceiver. In fact, okay, listen, I'm not denying that. Could a scientist make you think a circle has 4 sides if he could hook your brain up to a vat? No.
Only linguistically, probably, but not truly.
Yeah, I think he could like tell me there's a square circle, but like I couldn't picture anything in that.
Or he could just say,
why not?
Or he could just say like a square. The word for square, the word for a thing with 4 sides is circle. He could just tell you that.
Yeah. As to why not, because you can't imagine that. It's like saying, can he convince you of a new color? And it's like, well, I mean, if he shows it to me, so like if you show me a square circle, like.
If he hooked you up, wait, this is different. He's saying if he hooked you up to a vat and every time you saw a circle, your brain translated it into a square. That might be possible.
Then it would just be a square.
But then it would just effectively be a square, probably.
Yeah, like it's like, oh, if every time I think of a pink elephant, I actually think of a tiger, it's like, okay, then it's a tiger, it's not a pink elephant.
Right.
like, can he stimulate the protons that make you mistake a square for circle? Well, that's not what protons do, but no.
Well, protons leading to neurons leading to...
Sorry, yeah, I mean, he could make me mistake circles for squares, but he couldn't make me think of a square circle. And it's a contradiction.
There's no sense in what... Yeah, right, because then either from your perspective, it would just be a square, and from the perspective of, like, I don't know, objectivity, it would still be a circle. But there's no... A square and a circle can't inhabit the exact... They can't be a square and a circle at the same time in the same sense. That's an important little add-on. In the same sense is really important. So it's a square and a circle in different senses, but not in the same sense.
Yeah, like a circle is defined by not being a square because it has no edges.
Right.
Or sorry, not no edges, has no corners.
Right.
But a square is defined as having 4 corners.
Mm-hmm.
So they negate each other.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. Worldview X entails the possibility of an evil deceiver that could distort your ability to recognize contradictions.
Sorry if this is convoluted. It's hard to keep up while writing. That's fine.
I know, brother. I know it is.
I'll put it to you like this. Your original argument, I think, is self-defeating because it implies that the law of identity and contradiction excluded middle would not exist, and therefore your first premise fails. Because your first premise assumes all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask ask ChatGPT.
Let me ask fucking Craig.
Yeah, let's ask William Lane Craig. Is there any defeater at all for the problem of hard solipsism? Anyone
imagine it fucking does it.
Even claims to be able to defeat it. There's no
cognito ergo sum. You gotta love the cognito ergo sum, dude.
Yep, love that. Descartes' own move beyond solipsism. But Descartes then argues that a non-deceptive God guarantees the existence of the external world. Problem, this relies on assuming God's existence, which itself is debated, of course.
So you're just swapping out God for assuming objective reality. So
right. So then William James and pragmatism, even if solipsism is true, but that's not a defeater because he's saying even if it's true, we still use, objectivity. Our senses evolved for survival. If they were completely unreliable, we wouldn't be here. I think there's something to that, yeah. This doesn't strictly disprove solipsism. It only argues that rejecting it is useful, but certainly it is. It's necessary, honestly. Kant argues that we cannot know things in themselves. Numina, look at that. Isn't that your name in the chat? Welcome, Agron. Right now, we're not really we're just kind of having a civil conversation about the problem of hard solipsism. And, oh, yeah, you guys can't see mine. There you go. And I'm just asking ChatGPT if there's anybody that even claims to be able to solve this problem. And if you haven't heard of it, the problem of hard solipsism, the idea that one can only be certain of their own mind's existence, and that everything else could potentially be an illusion. And we've said that nobody believes this. You can't hold this belief pragmatically. But again, we haven't thought of a way that you can defeat it, and it doesn't seem like anybody really has. And it comes down to the Descartes, I think, therefore I am, as like the only thing you can be sure about, sort of. So then Wittgenstein, private language argument, argues that language and meaning require a public shared world. I think that's a strong point. Definitely. If solipsism were true, language requires shared rules would be impossible. But a solipsist could claim that their mind creates the illusion of communication. That would be like if everybody is a simulation of your own mind, therefore language works, which is, of course, insane. So, again, none of these things like logically defeat it, but there's a lot of really good reasons not to believe it.
I mean, the most emotive reason for not believing in it, to me personally, is I've come up with every amazing symphony ever created, and also every terrible idea ever invented. I was both Hitler and Mozart. Like,
Yep.
that seems
it does make
First of all,
you
insulting.
God, which is especially if you don't believe in
sure.
God, means is even harder to accept. Yeah, some physicists suggest we might be in a simulation, but that would imply an external reality. And to me, simulation theory is not powerful at all. It's like the least, sort of nuanced form of theism, honestly. The simulation argument doesn't defeat Solipsism, it just shifts the question to who is running the simulation, right? Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I don't think there's a really strong defeater, but again, tons of great reasons not to believe in it. Now, something I wanted to talk about is the evidence for the resurrection, if people are interested in that. And they're not really debating, they're proselytizing, pretending to debate. I'm not sure who we're proselytizing, Brandon.
Okay, buddy, I'm an atheist. I'm not proselytizing shit.
They ultimately both presuppose gods are real. Infamous, do you presuppose that gods are real?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I presuppose God is fucking real. Yeah, he's in my fucking ass right now.
Yeah. And then Brandon says, still better explanation than God. I'm guessing he's talking about solipsism. So that's just where Brandon's at. Let's see if we missed anything in this. Okay, let me try this.
Proselytizing is crazy.
I know, it's insane. A scientist could make you have contradictory beliefs by stimulating your neurons. He could thus make your reasoning unreliable. You assume that your reasoning is reliable when thinking about whether this scientist exists. That's self-refuting. Thus, granting the existence of the evil scientist is self-refuting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so because of premise 3, premise 1 fails.
You assume that your reasoning is reliable when thinking about whether the scientist exists. Yeah.
Yeah, so if the scientist doesn't exist, he can't change my mind, so.
Right. Science can make you have contradictory beliefs by stimulating your neurons. Okay? So
and I also disagree with that premise. I don't think that you can actually be made to believe anything in contradiction. I think that in moments you can have contradictory beliefs from what you said or believed, but I don't think you can actually at any one moment hold a contradictory belief, at least internally. Like, I can obviously say that, like, the sky is green, and that's a contradictory statement, but, like, that's nothing to do with my internal worldview, right? All my worldviews are necessarily, at any given time, consistent. Because, like, no one holds their whole worldview right there at any given moment. We just don't think like that.
No, probably not. Yeah.
We think from idea to set of idea to set of idea, like.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, are you just walking around being like, God exists, God exists, God exists, God exists? I doubt it.
No, but it's like, well, where do my other beliefs about everything come from? Like, I guess this coffee tastes good. It's like you're assuming that good exists and that you're, like all this stuff. And it's not like conscious on the front of your mind, but there's some like background processes.
I think there's memories about it.
I
think there's memories about it, and if there's abilities and if there's thoughts that are so ingrained into how you run your everyday life that they might even be unconscious. But I'll tell you this right now.
Yeah.
Even though I hold this worldview and it's very solid, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't be thinking about it constantly. It's not even in the back of my head. I don't live my life being like, morality is only justified because it's technically the wrong thing, no matter why I can justify it. Like, I don't think that.
No, for sure.
When asked about it, I think.
Right. Although I think there's something.
Why couldn't your mind be forced to believe contradictory statements? Like, it depends. At any given moment, no, because you can't think of a square circle. You can't think of anything contradictory. Can you contradict the thoughts you had like 5 seconds ago? Yes. What do you mean, why not? Because they're contradictions. It's baked in. Think of a square circle right now. Actually, think of any contradiction right now.
Yeah. It's tough. I'm actually trying to think of one.
Yeah, like you can't think of any contradiction that actually has any kind of answer, right? Like, even the liar's paradox has no answer. You're just assuming that we couldn't force with sufficient technology. I mean, I'm assuming that you have no evidence for that because we don't have that technology.
Brandon, if we're so wrong, you think of a contradiction. What is it? Tell us, Brandon, please. We need you. Got
think
it
anyone
locked
needs
in.
Brendan.
Now what? Well, tell us if you have it locked in. Otherwise, I don't believe you. Could we force this with sufficient? No, yeah. Again, it's like for the most.
It's magic.
The
Like, what if we could do it?
The easiest thing to the easiest one to talk about is the square circle. A square, which is also a circle, and I don't even know how you would begin to, even with technology, force that.
But could it be logically possible for a piece of technology? I mean, definitely not logically possible. No.
Yeah, because I think the nature of a contradiction is that it's not logically
illogical.
Possible. Yeah. I have a.
What do you mean? Why?
I have a square circle in my
literally
mind
contradictory
right now. Prove me wrong. Okay, you're
Okay,
wrong.
you don't exist.
Yeah, you don't exist. That's why.
Prove you exist.
Yeah, prove to me that you exist, Brandon, first, and then
Pretend I'm a Republican and you're a trans woman. Prove to me you exist.
Okay. Why to?
I said that he.
I think the definition of a contradiction is that it is logically impossible. Or
it's logically impossible, yeah.
Or another way that I like to put it sometimes is that the second that that one part of it started to exist, the other one would be canceled out. In the case of a square circle.
Sure. Its properties negate itself.
Yeah, its proper. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Brandon, I can't prove to you. That's the point. I can't prove to you that I exist.
Don't worry, we don't have to prove anything to Brandon. He doesn't exist.
I know. Why are you responding to someone who doesn't exist? Yeah, that's a good point. Good point, Brandon. I'll stop responding.
Have you ever talked to ChatGPT?
Yeah. Okay. Real Human Being is typing. You guys can interact for a second. I'm going to go to the bathroom, and then we might start a new segment.
Sure. Can't a mind be forced to believe two statements that contradict? Like, suppose the scientist makes you believe that you are a table, you have a table. Now, can't this super scientist make you also believe the table doesn't exist? Yes, but not at the same time. That's the point. It would be a contradiction if you believed both things simultaneously, but you don't believe in both things simultaneously. You believe the first thing, then you believe the second thing. You can't both at the same time believe two statements that contradict each other. It's just not possible. You can't do it. For instance, the square circle.
Okay. All right. ChatGPT exists. I don't. I do agree that ChatGPT exists, actually.
And I do agree that you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Can't a
I
mind
don't
be
think
forced to
that...
believe suppose the science makes you believe that you have a table. Now, can't the super scientist make you also think that this table doesn't exist? In a way, that's kind
my
of
response was. My response was not at the same time. That's what I told him. So he says, I don't think that...
Yeah, importantly, at the same time, in the same sense. That's really important. In the same sense.
I don't think that would be a contradiction. Like, tables exist, true. Table doesn't exist, true. Not sure why that would require an actual contradiction to exist. Because the thought is contradictory, right? It's about the internal contradiction. That's the thing. So if you can't at any one given time believe two opposing things to be true. Right.
Like if you believe the table exists, then by definition you'd believe it doesn't. That you don't believe it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah. Like for instance, try and believe in a square circle right now. You can't.
Right.
You can believe in a square at one time or a circle at another time, but you can't believe in a square circle. And I don't care what the super scientist does unless he's got magic powers that like are greater than God's.
Yeah, even if he had magic powers, exactly, it'd have to be greater than God's, because God's power is what is possible.
Yeah, it's logical. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I can't, but suppose this guy has magic device. Okay, well, if it's magic, you know. Like...
To break and to believe these two statements are both true.
I mean, you're just saying if what I'm saying is true, would it be true? And sure.
Yeah, this is the classic real human being. I take it that you're a theist or a Christian or something, so I would encourage you to look up, and I will pull up a quick video that you can watch later. We might not watch it together, but about God's omniscience, omnipotence. And the point is to address this question of, this is the exact video by Inspiring.
But also fell for the same reason, since it.
So the point is, like, can God make a rock that is too heavy for him to lift? And the answer is, this question doesn't make sense. It doesn't apply to God because God is logical, rational. Actually, maybe let's watch a few minutes of this. Maybe not the whole thing, just to give you a sense of what we're talking about here.
Some non-theists argue the concept of omnipotence is logically impossible, that no being could ever really be said to be omnipotent, because such an idea is inherently self-contradictory, and thus an omnipotent God cannot possibly exist. Very few professional philosophers make this argument, and even some atheistic philosophers have shot it down, because it is based on a simple misunderstanding. First, let's define omnipotence. Omnipotence simply means all-powerful. If a being is all-powerful, they would have power over everything else in existence. No other being, process, object, or combination of anything in existence could ever overpower an omnipotent being. Omnipotence simply means one is all-powerful and could never be defeated by anything else in existence. In other words, everything else in existence combined would still be less powerful than an omnipotent being. If this is all omnipotence means, there is nothing logically contradictory going on. There is nothing incoherent about being all-powerful, and thus, there is no omnipotence paradox. The problem occurs when someone defines omnipotence differently. Instead of it meaning all-powerful, they define it as the ability to do anything, which is an incoherent concept. It is in fact logically impossible to be able to do anything. One cannot make a being that is married and also a bachelor. One cannot be evil and simultaneously morally perfect. One cannot have the ability to create the logically impossible, like a square circle or a married bachelor.
Right.
These concepts are logically impossible, and no being can bring them into existence. Luckily, this is not what omnipotence has to mean, as we explained in the beginning of this video. It just means being all-powerful over everything else in existence. If we have two definitions of omnipotence, and theists are using the first, and some atheists are using the second, to say an omnipotent being cannot exist, then we have a straw man argument. Everyone should get to define what they mean, not have definitions imposed upon them.
Yo, pause real quick.
Okay, so the rest of the video is about why is addressing atheists, but just to the point of why couldn't you force this sort of belief in a square circle? That would require the ability to do anything. That would have nothing to do with omnipotence, and even God doesn't have the ability to do anything the way it's defined there, then certainly this magical scientist wouldn't have that.
Yeah, this magical scientist is able to make God imagine a fucking square circle, and it's crazy.
Right.
But like the thing is that like, and the one thing that I do find funny about this video is a lot of theists will complain about how people have changed the. I don't believe it actually has changed for the record, but like what atheist means, but never acknowledge the definition of omnipotence changing.
Did it change?
Yeah, it used to mean the ability to do anything. Like that's exactly what it used to mean. But then you had like the problem of with the contradictions, and now it means all powerful.
Sure, and I think it's totally valid for definitions to change, especially the definition of atheism as you learn more and the theory becomes more strong. And because if I forced my definition of atheism onto you, that would be just as unfair as you forcing your definition of omnipotence onto me or something like that. So yeah, I don't think theists should argue that way. You changed the definition, therefore it's not legit. I mean, what? No, I mean, Christ completely changed the definition of God. Well, not changed, but revealed to a greater extent the definition of God. So, of course, other definitions can be changed. Yeah, that's what's said. Greetings, David. Feel free to join the chat if you want, David. I'll pop that link down there for you. But we were talking about solipsism. I think we're sort of losing steam on that. Atheism is not a theory.
It's true. It's not.
Yeah, if you define it, if you define it in the modern sort of sophisticated way, yeah, I guess it's not. It's the only problem is when it is defined as a theory or when it is made as a positive claim that
it's basically
no God
it
exists.
used to mean what people think it used to mean was that no God exists. Yeah.
Right.
Or no gods exist.
And God or gods. And
well,
now, how would you
Greece,
frame it
so...
now? How would you frame the definition now so that I have a view of what the most, modern, normal view of atheism is? It's just the lack of belief in a God.
The lack of belief in God or gods. So
not being
it's literally
not being
it's the negation. Right? Not even lack of belief is not non-convinced, like not being convinced. So I think lack of belief is fine, but like it's literally what the word means. Like a is the negation in, I think it was ancient Greece, of the thing that precedes it, which is a theism. Theism being the belief in a god. So without belief in God, which means you don't believe in God. It doesn't mean that there are no gods.
Right.
That would be non-theism.
Right. Okay, cool, real human being. Thanks for joining. Yeah, definitely check out that inspiring philosophy video and other ones. His video on Job is the one I was talking about. It is 40 minutes long, so I might try to like pick out the parts that are the most sort of concise and interesting for this channel. And then we'll talk about that another time. But he has a great video on Job. I think that is, totally unique and incredible take, and I think accurate. I think biblically accurate. What were you gonna say?
You have a point. You can have beliefs that entail contradictions, but you like for instance, if I have a belief that squares can be circles, and a belief that circles can be squares,
right?
I'm not thinking of a contradiction yet. But if I then try to think of the entailment of the beliefs, then I would end up trying to think of a contradiction. But I can't think of the contradiction.
Right. Yeah, you can have totally. And I think there's a lot of worldviews that entail contradictions. So yeah, certainly you can have
the minute you try to get me to think of it is different.
Yeah. Usually when you have a worldview that implies contradictions, it's the lack of you've not carried it out to its extent, or carried it out to the point where you're then forced to think of that contradiction, or you just say whatever, I ignore it or something like that. So atheists are not making a claim. Yeah, I wonder though, when you have the negation of theism, the lack of belief in God, does that imply, I don't know, maybe it doesn't imply anything. Unless you have sort of an extreme agnosticism, like radical agnosticism, then you typically do carry some positive claim about the nature of reality.
Well, I mean, I think therefore I am. It'd be like the base one.
That would be...
It's a positive claim, so...
Yeah. And then that's just it.
I mean, I think therefore I am entails logical absolutes, but I'd have to look deeper into that.
Okay, we got...
It's Henry.
Oh, that's right, I forgot. Okay, welcome. Let's see if Henry's got something for us today. All right, you're invited to speak, Henry, whenever you get around to that. Oh, I see. So your objection is, as I understand it, that imagining a square circle would be imagining an existing contradiction, and thus an evil scientist can't think of one. Like, I can't form a mental image of a circle with 15 sides. Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Definitely. He could force you to have the belief that this is possible, but then when you get down to it, it just couldn't be possible. It couldn't be
like, you could make me believe in God, but like me right now thinks that it isn't the case.
Right.
But
right. Right. Yeah, I think as long as the atheist doesn't make the positive claim that there is no God, then it's not logically, or it's not I don't know, it's a much stronger claim than what we're used to hearing and what sometimes it gets boiled down to on the really simplistic front. Yeah, definitely. So we'll see what... This is an interesting video, though. Maybe we'll watch Daniel Dennett.
Dan, I would really...
One of the 4 horsemen of new atheism. It looks like he's going to address the problem of evil, which is the whole video. I think that is the strongest argument for atheism, to be fair.
This motherfucker needs to get like a chair.
I know. I love
Stop talking in this church.
I know, they're sitting in pews, like, he's got to turn around. That's kind of funny.
However, I think you're granting enough for my objection to work. If you grant that we have beliefs that we can have sloppy reasoning, or to look over the contradictions and tailor our beliefs, then scientists could make me think that my reasoning is reliable when it actually isn't. Yeah, you could be made to think that your reasoning is reliable when it isn't. Absolutely. But does that have anything to do with reality?
Well, yeah.
Like, even if you're in the Matrix and you're made to believe shit is wrong all the time, like you're just like kept in this fucking weird, chaotic, like you have no idea what's going on state, right? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about reality.
Right.
And it still implies that you exist.
Right. What's up, Sean? What's up, Beep? Welcome. How you guys doing? I just saw your little green on Beep, meaning it looks like you were trying to talk, but we couldn't hear anything. That's okay.
Oh, hello?
Oh, yeah. There you are. There you are.
Oh, okay. I was saying, how you doing?
Good.
Did y'all come in because of the ad?
We were talking about solipsism. I think, we're sort of at a standstill on that. I mean, I think we all pretty much agree on the basics of it.
Solipsism.
What's that? I'm going to turn
I said, no, it's all right. I said I hate solipsism.
I know, me too.
Everyone does, brother.
Welcome to the club. Me too. Because it's impossible to defeat and yet is so obviously not practical, pragmatic. I would say even it's pretty obvious that it's not true, but again, not provably untrue, just intuitively completely untrue.
Right.
Okay. So then, if you guys are interested in this, I'm kind of interested. This first segment is called the affirmative arguments for atheism, which I'd be interested to see if there are valid affirmative arguments for atheism. How we break
Dan,
it apart.
I would really
The evil
like to
deceiver
know
can
whether
make
God
me
exists,
have
and I
unreliable reasoning and prevent me from noticing contradictions. However, doesn't the cognito already assume that you aren't overlooking something with cogito? After all, no, because the whole idea of me thinking anything, whether it's contradiction or not, it would include I think, therefore I am. The start doesn't need me to be cohesive or coherent.
Right.
I just need to exist.
Yeah, it just implies an existence, not necessarily like a consistent one or a coherent one. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you, real human being. Let's see what Daniel Dennett has to say.
been asking a lot of smart people questions.
I don't like how much like Darwin this guy looks like.
Arguments here and,
He
and
does.
all that. And most of the people who don't believe in God would seek to attack and undermine the arguments of those who do. Fine. I'd like to flip that around and say, what are the affirmative arguments for non-belief or for atheism?
Well, I think the first one, it simply has to be, this is the way naturalism always argues. I mean, the burden of proof is sort of on the other side. Don't multiply entities beyond necessity. So the main reason for atheism is what for? What do we need God for? Especially since we've got a surfeit of reasons for seeing why, in the absence of a God, we would nevertheless believe in God. I mean, there's plenty of natural arguments explaining why this false belief would arise.
Am I missing something, or did he essentially say there are no affirmative arguments for atheism? It seems like he just said. It seems like he just said.
There's one affirmative argument for atheism, which is I don't believe it.
Right. But he just said the burden of proof is on you. So this guy asked, okay, if you...
The burden of proof is absolutely not on me.
Unless you make the claim that there is no God.
Yeah, I mean, that's a positive claim about existence.
Right.
But if I just say I'm not convinced that a God exists, then there's no burden of proof
there.
there.
Go. There's no argument to be had, no affirmative argument to make, because it's just a belief that you have, which is fair. I think that's fair.
So we don't have the puzzle of, gosh, where there's smoke, there's fire, where there's so much belief that God must exist. No, I think we can just set that aside. So now
as neutral.
As neutral, yeah. So that cuts no real ice here. So now the question is, if there's no positive argument for the existence of God, then we should just assume there isn't one. For the same reason, we should assume that there isn't a Gog. What's Gog? Well, it's a sphere of copper 2 miles in diameter with the word Gog stamped on it, and it's outside the light cone.
So we can never see it.
Yeah, we have no reason to posit its existence, so we might just well assume it doesn't exist.
So the core concept is that the burden is on the other side.
Sure.
Yeah. That somebody has to come up with an affirmative burden, a proof of God in order for us to see it, because that is the best argument for atheism.
Well, maybe if we want some further reinforcement on this, if you understand that God is supposed to be good and supposed to be all-powerful, then the problem with evil really looms. And evil is everywhere, and it's not just evil so that we can be heroes and triumph over evil. That makes a good story, and it makes our lives more exciting and all that. But what about the extraordinary brutality that we discover in the animal world when we find insects that
I smell Alex O'Connor on him.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Alex is inspired by him.
Yeah, he's taking it from Daniel.
Yeah. The eggs eat them out from the inside.
So pause real quick.
Yep.
So one thing I think that the Christian could say is that even the so-called suffering of animals would be justified because of, let's even say that one life goes on to eternity. It doesn't matter how much everyone on this planet suffers for as long as it takes to get to Revelation. Even if one life is saved and goes to heaven and has eternal, everlasting pleasure, it outweighs all of it.
That is a valid argument. That is the defeater for the logical problem of evil. As far as I know, the emotional problem of evil doesn't have a defeater. But as long as the atheist or someone admits that there's not a logical contradiction between their being
I think there's a moral contradiction. I think there's a moral contradiction depending on which creation claim you claim to espouse, right? Like, if God needed to create the world and this is the only way he could create it, because every other way was like a contradiction or something, I feel like that you could have some kind of justified reason as to why he did everything he did, right? But if you think that he could just create universes out his ass, that were different and didn't lead to suffering and et cetera, he could just have infinite pleasure without the need for suffering, which, however minuscule, would necessarily be a better universe.
Sure, maybe, but then those universes would necessarily not have free will, which I see to be a greater good.
Right, but that isn't true either, because humans in the garden had free will.
I would just say their will was aligned with God's will, but Satan obviously had free will before that. And
he also created Satan?
You see, he created Satan for a good purpose with a good quality, free will. But because those two goods could cancel each other out, therefore evil, animal suffering, everything, all the evil that we examine, whether has a...
Right, but my point is that you can have free will, right, which is the thing we want to keep, without having sin. And so you having free will doesn't necessitate this kind of argument where it's like, oh, well, the reason he's doing this is because they have to have free will. Because, that's just clearly not true in the biblical account, at least. I don't think it's true for any of the Abrahamic religions.
Well, we're not talking about having free will without sin, because certainly in the Garden of Eden they had free will and there was no sin. But could you have free will without the possibility of sinning? And I don't think so.
Yes.
I don't think so.
Well, so for instance, right, you have free will in the Garden of Eden and the tree is there, right?
Yeah.
God plucks the tree out. Do you have free will?
Well, the question is, could he have created reality? Could he have created free will at all without putting the tree there?
Well, it's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical. Let's just say he plucks the tree away and to somewhere they can never reach. It's impossible, right?
Okay.
What's the difference between them having free will when it was there and when I took it away?
I just think that if you took it away, so to speak, or made it impossible or whatever, then that that just wouldn't be free will, because the tree represents a choice. Like the choice is the fall. The choice to eat from the tree is the fall. So if there is no choice,
it is a choice, but it is not the only choice.
No, it's not the only choice, but well, is it?
Well, no, because they made the choice, right? Like they chose to
they could
make
eat
love,
a peach
like
or a pear or something like that. You know, they could have.
Yeah, the whole point was that all the other trees were fine, right? Like that's the thing, is that like, so I do think that you can have free will without the possibility of sin. Like that's absolutely true. Like God could just take away the tree, and them having free will with the tree isn't changed by me 5 seconds later taking away the tree. So you can have free will. You can have free will, and you can have like this eternally good heaven state area, right? But well, I mean, it depends on your denomination, but like some people view the Garden of Eden as like heaven, like, but doesn't matter. So like you can have infinite pleasure and connectedness to God with free will without the need for the suffering, which I think is the defeater for the argument. Because otherwise you'd have to say there are some greater goods that God can not do without suffering. And I think that would also say that he isn't all powerful.
There are some greater goods that God could not do without suffering?
Yeah, because if you're saying that the suffering is needed, right, so that these greater goods can be achieved, you would necessarily have to say that God can't do them without the suffering.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Right. So either God isn't omnipotent, or
well, but now you're defining omnipotent as doing things that are doing anything rather than doing anything which is possible.
Okay, so you do think he needs suffering to do the thing?
I think in order to instantiate in order to instantiate the greatest possible good, it seems like there needs to be suffering. Yeah.
Okay. So you're just saying that he needed to have this amount of suffering so he could do the greatest of goods.
At least the possibility for it, but yeah.
At least the possibility for it. Well, I mean, I think you think he's all-knowing, so I don't think it's even a possibility. It's a guarantee.
Well, then we're back to the determinism free will.
I mean, I don't care about the whole determinism free will thing. Like whether or not it's a guarantee is like a different thing. But like, because I think that even if you believed in it, you'd say it was compatible with him believing that.
Do you think Infamous, the contributor who is most often engaged, is a bad actor or a real atheist? I think he's a real.
Is this from Comic Brandon?
That's from Comic Brandon. Yep.
Of course. You know how I can tell? Because I'm very engaged.
Yeah, exactly.
Comic Brandon is just jealous.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a troll.
I'm the better Brandon, dude.
Okay, let's actually. I did also see a good.
The problem of evil is not an emotional argument. You have free will regardless of whether you have the bad options or not, because you can choose between two different goods. Yeah, I agree, Sean. Beep, you could absolutely have free will without sin. The only reason why things are sins is because God considers them to be so. I mean, I think that you'd agree, yeah.
That is up for debate.
Well, actually, no, I think you'd say
the
they
church
are
fathers
so,
disagree
but things
with
only
that.
are. Well, I think you'd have to say that, right? Because
it's
you'd
the
say
Euthyphro. It's the Euthyphro dilemma. Are things pious because the gods will them to be pious, or are the gods themselves pious and therefore things are pious?
Well, that's why I think it's both, right? Like that's the thing, is that you're saying that God's nature is necessarily good, and therefore all good things are godlike or godly or in shit like that.
Yeah. So it's like it's his nature not to sin, therefore he doesn't sin. He doesn't just arbitrarily decide what sin is, what's good and what's bad. His nature is goodness, and so therefore we have the privation of goodness as sin. That's how.
There's something that is. Wait, there isn't something that is an objective sin. Sure, there are moral rights and wrongs, but God created the universe and decides moral rights and wrongs, I assume is what you're saying, but
yeah.
I don't think he decides them as much as he embodies them.
Okay. I did watch a good video. Maybe it's the Sam Shamoon one.
So now let's talk about why the tree of the knowledge and good and evil. Are we ready? why the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Why did God put it in the tree? Now, we have to go through God's character. 2:15 to 17. Here's why. Okay, are you ready? Here is why. And in this way, you're going to see how beautiful our God is. Well, watch here. You ready?
Not the process.
Okay, now watch. So he plants the tree. Then Yahweh God took the man and set him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. And Yahweh God commanded the man, saying, from any tree of the garden you may surely eat. But from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat from it, for in the day that you eat from it you will surely die. Now, I know.
Wait, hold on.
God knows.
Yep.
So, I know you're just gonna say some like fucking metaphor or whatever the fuck, but like I do find it funny that he says, "You shall not eat from it," and then they eat from it, and he's like, "No one's ever done that before."
What is you're saying? Shall implies like this determinism, like or something, or
he's like, "You won't do this," and then they do it. Like,
yeah.
no.
The question is, does shall, like in the Greek, is shall, or actually in the Hebrew in this situation, is shall a command or is it a prescriptive, like you will do this?
I mean, it's a command when he tells people to go into the desert after the slaves are freed. So
yeah, it seems like shall is used as a command here, because obviously if it were prescriptive, then they just simply could not have, like you said. I thought you were going to point out the day thing, which a lot of people say, but that's also a really good reason not to read the 7 days as 24-hour periods. And instead of as a day, like a day representing sort of like an eon or an age or something like that, or even something more metaphorical than like any period of time, more like a cycle of day and night, of light and dark, of chaos and order.
Yeah.
So
Sean and Beep are having their own little debate in the chat.
Oh, are they? Maybe I'll tune into that real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like if you deny the idea, God is goodness itself. God cannot change himself, since God does not have any passive powers. Yeah, that's straight from Aquinas. I feel like if you deny the idea that God doesn't determine what is moral, would be the same as denying his omnipotence.
Well, he doesn't determine what it is, though. That's the problem, is that he is what good is. Like,
his nature is that
the thing
which
you're talking about.
Right. If you're making an assertion,
Also,
if God is all good, how do we know that? Good according to what standard? God is being, and goodness is being. Are we not being? We are here. God is the totality of being. He's being itself. We are not being itself. We have all these other sort of qualities.
I think you could say that God is synonyms with every good aspect is kind of another thing. Like,
well, good defined by Aquinas, which is what Sean's sort of specialty is actuality, as opposed to potentiality. So the fullness of actuality is being. We certainly aren't the fullness of actuality ourselves.
I'm definitely fully me.
You're fully you, but you're not fully everything, or not fully every active,
Well, everything is fully everything.
Well, no, like a tree isn't fully the earth. A tree is just a part of it.
No, I'm saying everything is fully everything. The universe is the universe.
Oh, everything is fully everything.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't think we need like an instantiation of something else to be that thing when the thing itself is already that thing.
Okay, yeah. I mean, part of the view is that God created the world and sustains it. So actually, the Christian would say that nothing could have being without God sort of sustaining, his active sustaining of it. But this entire realm, existence itself, would have been created by him. No, so wouldn't the rules of said existence have to be determined by him?
Oh God, we're back here.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I'm not going to say that. I'm kind of more interested back in the tree. Well, we'll let them argue that out, and we'll get back to it.
I think we should probably get back to Jesus' resurrection, but
that's fair. But now I already started
why
this. I
do
just
it?
want to watch a few minutes of it.
Okay.
It has to do with God being love. Now here, you want to know what love is? Here's love. What is love, Paul? Inspired by the Spirit. Love is patient. Love is kind. It's not jealous. Does not brag. It's not puffed up. Does not act unbecomingly. Here, does not seek its own, is not provoked. Love does not seek the interest of the lover.
Real quick.
It seeks the...
Yeah, let's not pretend like God isn't provoked.
Well, what do you mean?
God is absolutely provoked.
Provoked?
He's been provoked. Yeah.
I think he's just. If you're talking about punishments he hands down because people run away from him, is that
all of his retaliatory actions are provoked? All of them.
I mean, maybe I guess.
I mean, unless there's like a secondary definition of provoke he wants to use here, but I don't think the other
well,
one
I think
makes any sense in
provoked
the
has
context.
this implication of like, you know, pushed to anger or something like.
Well, like he can't be goaded
From
like, that's
something,
not
yeah,
true
like he can't be
either.
goaded. He can't, from something external to him can't provoke him. Like, I mean, he can't even be affected really.
He literally
material
got
things.
into like a bet war with fucking the devil about Job.
Well, then we could watch the Job video, and that there's really interesting language in Job, which explains how this is not just like God making a bet or whatever. So part of that is that that the devil is like in his company, and the devil is basically trying to provoke God essentially, and God
it works.
God, no, it doesn't, because God himself is the one that brings up Job. And so the implication here is that Job was not walking with God truly in his heart.
The interest.
And this language is seen throughout the entire book of how actually Job brought this on himself, and God presented Job to the devil to test him from God's own will, from God's own knowledge of Job's heart. And the devil thought, oh, well, I'll test Job and I'll do, I'll heap everything onto him, and then he'll turn away from you. And then what happened is Job makes the most glorious statement, affirmation of God's love at the end of the book. And so God knows all of this.
God let him do that.
What's that?
But God let him do that. He was like,
yeah. God instructed the devil to do that, even.
Exactly, dude. It's a bet. He goaded him into doing it 100%.
Well, if anything, God goaded the devil, but the devil certainly didn't goad God, because the devil was only there by God's permission, by God's inviting the devil in.
Right, no, but now we're talking about like a series of events, right? Like, obviously, if you invite me to your house and I goad you in your house, you didn't invite me to goad you, right?
No, but the implication in Job is that God did invite him to, quote-unquote, goad him, but God already knows how this whole thing is going to play out. So there's really no goading. The whole story is constructed and maintained and sustained by God. So it's not like the devil's like, let me do this thing. Or, the devil didn't like come up with this himself. God is the one that presents Job to the devil and hands him over. And really, the story is that Job handed himself over first by not truly walking with God. The main point of it is that Job thought that doing right acts and good works means that God should just give him things, give him everything. And that's what the devil points out. And that's why God allows the devil to come in and point that out. And the point of the story is that faith alone saves you.
Yeah, faith without works, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So Job did good works, but he didn't have true faith. And we can explicate that. And Inspiring Philosophy has an amazing video about this. But
I also think the story of Job might, like, the message of it might also just, like, negate a lot of people who are just like, oh no, atheists who do good things are fine. And I'm like, well, Job.
True. Yeah, I think faith is really important for salvation.
Yeah, like he literally is just like, faith matters so much that I'm going to take everything away from you until you, like, believe in me. Like,
until you have true faith. Yeah.
But I feel like that's like if we are to believe that, like for instance, if you think that I'm going to go to heaven if I'm a good person, but not necessarily if I'm a believer, you'd have to deny that story.
I think ultimately the only way to go into heaven would be to believe. The question is, can you believe post this life? That would be the important question.
Well, if you can believe post this life, then why did it even matter to make the wager?
Why did it? Well, to show us the importance of faith. I mean, it's always much better. It's always important to believe in this life. Like I said, I know where salvation is, but I don't know where it's not. So I don't know what happens to the good person, non-believer, who then enters the afterlife scenario. I don't even know what the afterlife looks like in any meaningful sense. So if it's the case that a good person dies and then Jesus comes to them and says, look, you're a good guy. You see me now. You hear me now. Will you accept me? I don't know that situation
But
can't happen, and I don't know that most people wouldn't just say, "Oh yes, of course I do," or give me another chance or something like that. Some kind of purgatory situation. Like I just don't know. So that's why I say that there's space
you'd have to
for.
assume otherwise.
What's that?
You'd have to assume otherwise, because when I ask you why doesn't God reveal himself to me right now, what would your answer be?
Well, my answer would be that he does. He's all around.
No, I mean like calm down, give me the proof that I need to convert me immediately, right now.
I truly don't, and this is part of the message of Job as well. Is like I truly don't know why God wouldn't just do that right now here for you in the exact way that you need. But I guess a possible answer is for you to have this sort of like journey, this like personal revelation, recognition, right? Recognition of God, and to build your sort of worldview from the ground up towards him so that he might come down and meet you. But I mean, truly the answer has to be, I don't know. I don't know why he wouldn't.
That's the first time I've ever seen, that's the most atheist thing I've ever heard you say, we'll get you yet.
That I don't know. That I don't know God's ways. I mean, that is
I don't know
definitely
God's
not
ways
atheist.
either, dude. I just take one step further, you know?
Yeah, you don't know his ways, and you also don't know that he exists, which is fair. I mean,
exactly. I mean, that might be one of his ways, but like,
I think one of his ways is divine hiddenness, as we call it, and the question is he totally hidden to the extent that you can't believe in him? I just disagree with that.
I'd say to the extent that you can't believe in him logically, yes.
No, I think you can believe in him logically. I just think
I think it would be bad logic.
Okay. I mean, if that's your opinion, I disagree. But
so if we're talking more vaguely, like, I don't think that any of the arguments propped up as the pillars for the beliefs in God actually amount to believing in any specific God. Maybe at best a theistic God, but like, even then it's kind of ambiguous because none of them have God in the premises, at least none of the ones that hold up to scrutiny in terms of like actual valid form and sound reason.
Well, but then you just ignore the historicity of Christ and the Gospels and things like that, or?
As we've established, even if all of the Bible was true except for God, like, literally showing up to people who I can't be, like, if Jesus rose right in front of me, doesn't prove God.
Yeah, to me, that would be an extreme hardness of heart to watch that, to hear his words and read his words and internalize them, and then to see him rise from the dead. That would be a pretty extreme
for instance,
departure.
What if you went back in time and met Muhammad, and Muhammad does all the miracles that it said that he does? Like, would you believe it? Would you be?
Would I be a Muslim?
A Muslim, yeah. See what I mean? It's not that easy.
Yeah, I guess it's not that easy.
Yeah, so if I just go back in time and I see Jesus rise from the dead, I'll have questions.
But I'm leaning towards, I mean, if I went back in time and I saw Muhammad actually split the moon in half and stuff like that, that would be very strong. I'd have to consider Allah a lot more seriously than I consider him
the devil.
Yeah.
The devil could definitely split the fucking moon in half.
Right, and that would be a possible answer. So I'd have
to, just the same way as
there'd
be a natural answer for him resurrecting.
Still, I'd have to consider it, and I don't know if the devil could split the moon in half. I'm sure he could.
I mean, he definitely can. Like,
I'm sure
if God allowed him to, I'd imagine.
Yeah, if God allowed him to, yeah. So even that would have to be part of the consideration. But then the analogy would be like, could the devil allow Jesus to rise from the dead? And then, given everything that Jesus says, and given the temptations of Christ by the devil and stuff like that. It's like, what would be the devil's purpose in that? To make more people that hate the devil? I mean, that doesn't really make sense.
Well, so that's not the analogy I'm extending to you. I'm just saying that in the same way that if I'm like, oh, take this holy book, what if it's true and you see the things that happen in it?
Right.
You still have another explanation for it based on your worldview. I have an explanation too, and to me the supernatural is the least likely of all the scenarios in which it explains what I see.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, just the same way that you would believe that God is the least likely for Muhammad having these abilities, it would probably be the devil.
Right.
Yeah, that's the same view I have.
Yeah, except you would say it's, well, I don't know. What would your explanation would be a naturalist one? For if you watch Jesus rise from the dead, your explanation would be some sort of like natural, process or something?
Well, so that wouldn't be my explanation. I wouldn't have an explanation. That's the main point. Like, it's the same way that you wouldn't have an explanation for the splitting of the moon shit, right? Unless you're in direct fucking contact with God, like you have on speed dial, right? And he's like, that shit was not me.
Right.
But, like, that's what I'm saying, is that there would be no answer, but I definitely wouldn't include a supernatural one in the same way that I don't include supernatural answers for anything I see in reality.
Okay.
Because it's not verifiable, it's unfalsifiable.
Okay, interesting. We have a question from American. Why was God so active in the Bible, but not at all like almost dead in any history after? Oh, I just completely disagree with that. I think the testimony of the saints. There's a quote that one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the believer is the testimony of the saints, and these people do incredible things. There's a guy, Saint Athanasius. Or was it Athanasius, or was he in the? He might have been an Athanasian monk. Gosh, shoot, we should watch that video. But it's just this. They have these sort of like miraculous powers, and then, to be fair, I've witnessed a miracle myself, which not the one that I explained before. It was actually prior to my belief in Jesus or anything, and I just thought like, oh, the universe, like that's why I was kind of like New Age. That's where my that's a whole thing to get into. We could do if we want, but
what was the miracle?
Okay, I'll explain it to you. Okay, so I had a roommate. This was probably almost 3 or more years ago.
It's interesting when anyone's life always starts with "I had a roommate."
Yes, I had a roommate, a friend of mine since middle school, and we lived here in LA together. His name was Greg. He died really tragically. He had a psychotic break. He thought that people were coming to kill him and kill his mother. And in order to save his mother, he jumped off the top of a hotel, and he died. He killed himself, but it's, is it as simple as like I don't think he had suicidal tendencies, but he really went insane. And so tragedy strikes. Then we're talking about like 3 days later. It's me and all of Greg's friends, all of our mutual friends, and we're meeting in that very apartment that we lived in together. And one of the key features of this apartment that Greg and I always used to sort of laugh about and have this, it was something we always pointed out to people when they came in, because they're like, why do you have these completely dead flowers in the, and I'll show you the pictures of what they looked like, in your planters on the windows. There were 3 windows with 3 planters, and they had these like twigs just sticking out of the ground. And we wanted to change them ever since we moved in, because it was just like weird to have these. I can show you exactly what they looked like. This is a picture from the nighttime, but you can see what these flowers looked like. See that? They're more like twigs, than
Your
flowers.
On.
Right. Okay. So, oh wait, you can't see on the Discord. I forgot. Let me show you in the Discord because it's more important. Okay, turn on camera, start virtual camera. Okay, you should be able to see it now.
Yep.
So this is what the plants in there was 3 windows that had these plants in them that looked like that. Mm-hmm. So, you can see they're totally dead. Totally brown. No sense in which those are ever being revived unless you replant them, right? So we're sitting.
I'm guessing when he died, one of them bloomed again. Is that it?
I'll show you what they looked like. So we were talking, crying. Actually, mostly it was a joyful event. We were laughing about Greg's life. He was such a great, kind person. This is also why I have to believe in some process for the non-believer, or the non, explicit believer to be entered into the kingdom of heaven, because he wasn't. He was not. And he was also a gay man. So that has to come into my view of how this all works. But anyway, and it's getting like hot and sweaty in the room. So I open the blinds to open the windows. And you have to remember, part of the reason we could not change the flowers is because the windows, the way they opened, they got blocked by that little like metal bar in front of them. So even if you wanted to, you literally couldn't even fit your hand outside the window to change them. Okay, and then I go to open the window and I gasp and I basically collapse on the ground and go, oh my God, what's happening? What is this? And everyone's like, what? And they come over and they see this image of the flowers. I'll give you a few different ones. So this is a close up. That's one of them. That's another. That's two at once. Every single planter was filled with these vibrant, bright red, totally living. I mean, even the green where they had once been, the green right there, where it had once been brown, was totally revitalized, totally alive. And we're all praising God, or not really, nobody really believed in God in that room, but we're just going, oh my God, it's this sign from Greg from the afterlife or something like that. I have a friend he was a naturalist, materialist, total skeptic. He goes, I mean, that's incredible. The coincidence is incredible, and it's a nice image, a nice sign, a nice story. But obviously, there's a naturalistic explanation, right? So, what are some of the naturalistic explanations that you can think of? And I'll tell you how we investigated that and whether we could, and what Winston, my naturalist friend, his final conclusion was. So, what might be an explanation for that type of thing?
Sure, they weren't dead.
They weren't dead? I mean, did you see the picture?
Yeah. So this is funny, actually.
Yeah.
I have plants that look exactly like this right now that are alive.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying these are necessarily like dead, like they can't be alive.
Like hydrangeas look like that when they're out of season.
Right, but this was the very. So remember, this is 2 days after Greg died. One of the explanations was, maybe Greg's mom, when she came over to get his stuff and talk to us and stuff like that, maybe she had like replaced them or something like that.
I don't think she'd be doing that because she's grief-stricken. But
exactly.
Sure.
Well, and we didn't think that either, but we did ask her, and then she, of course, collapsed in gratitude, and because of course she had not done that. Another thing is we asked the building, did you guys replace these? Like our landlord in the building, did you guys replace these flowers? One, they hadn't replaced anybody else's and any of the other planters. They were all equally as dead. And they said, of course, we did not do that. And then is your explanation, and that morning that we had all met there, I had noticed, because I walked into my apartment and, of course, just traumatized, horrified, see these dead plants in the window and literally had this thought and this emotion and this experience of, oh my God, death. This place was doomed to death and destruction from the beginning. Death is surrounding me in every way. So that morning that we had met, those plants had been dead like that. So is your explanation that within like 12 hours they could come back to life like that? Rebloom like that?
So one thing that does happen a lot of the times with flowers, obviously I don't know what the specific species is, but I would imagine it would have to be this kind of, especially with flowering plants, is they regain all their color in literally 24 hours.
Under 24 hours. It happens to be at that time as well.
Around 24 hours. Well, yeah, no, obviously, great coincidence, right? Like, I think that it's, I think there's a symmetry to life like that, right? Like, I can find a lot of meaning in stuff that happens like that all the time. We're pattern recognition machines, right? I'm not saying that that's all we are, but we definitely do that a lot, and we definitely like to imply meaning where there might not be any. And I think that might be one of these occasions. Obviously, I don't have time to investigate the flowers, but
sure,
obviously, like, there's been a lot of similar things like this in my life, actually. It's funny that you bring up something like this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in a lot of people's lives that tell you stories like this, where there seems to be this kind of narrative symmetry almost.
Yes, exactly, because life is a story, because God is real. That's the explanation for that. Otherwise, there'd be no explanation for this type of coincidence.
Well, there would be, which is we recognize patterns, which we do. There's a lot of these things that go unnoticed, that we don't consider, and there's a lot of things that don't happen, that don't do this thing to us.
Well, of course, but in this case especially, and perhaps I'd like you to explain one of these other instances, like the pattern has to be there to recognize it. So what's the pattern?
Well, not necessarily, right? Like if you see, for instance, a rock that looks a lot like a face, is it a face?
No, but what about the instance of the plants coming back to life within 12 hours, or actually less than 12 hours, probably more like 8 hours, on this specific day, at the specific time, in this specific gathering of friends, mourning the loss of
I would have to just not believe it was 8 hours, because that's an actual impossibilty, personally.
So you have to believe that I'm lying, right? And that is what I expected.
No, that is lying. I wouldn't think that. I wouldn't think that you were lying. Me thinking that you're lying isn't the only option here. Me thinking that you're misunderstood or misinformed is also an option.
Okay. Well, but I'd have to be misunderstood. I'd have to be so misunderstood that I had been perceiving these flowers to be like dead when they were actually alive the whole time, right? Like my senses would have to be fundamentally unreliable.
Well, no, because flowers like that do actually look like that and still be alive. Like, as I said, hydrangeas look like that.
They look like these twigs, these brown twigs coming out of the ground, totally lifeless.
Hydrangeas specifically are actually more wooden, but yeah, they just are dead. Like they're leaking, they're drooping, they're like non-hardwood, they look like they're rotting, and then all of a sudden, in 24 hours, when they come in season, boom, they're just blue.
And then why are all the other flowers and all the other planters dead like that? Or not dead, but like whatever, fake dead, as you described. And just the ones in our apartment are like that.
I would imagine it has something to do with the position of your apartment.
Right. Okay. So we're adding all these all these complete improbable coincidences onto this event that happened to give it a naturalistic explanation. And I'm saying that's not the Occam's razor way to discern what happened here.
So, to be very specific, Occam's razor isn't the simplest answer is correct. It's the simplest answer is usually correct. And so, what I would say is, what's the simplest answer here? The simplest answer definitely isn't there's a God, because that's infinitely more complex than anything I could bring up.
Well, no, what you're implying, if there's a God, then this is something that would be easy for him to do. It would actually be extremely simple. Right. But you're given your scenario, if there is no God,
existence is different.
If there is no God, there has to be a preponderance of totally improbable circumstances in order to create this event, right?
I don't even know how you determined it was improbable. Because again, we're not God. We don't know anything about the situation in like an absolute way.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a good point. This is a good thing to point out. And yes, Sean is right. God is simple, fundamentally, ontologically, totally simple. So it's like sort of a misnomer, or not a misnomer.
I disagree that he's simple.
Well, I know you do, but the tradition doesn't. The religion doesn't. And
fine.
So, wait, what was I talking about before that?
You were saying how you're going to have to assume all these like naturalistic explanations while God is simple.
Right. So the naturalistic explanations require all these different things to happen at exactly the time and exactly the place at exactly the right way.
But they didn't happen at exactly that time, right? Like, this is the thing.
Yeah.
If it had happened a day prior, you would have gotten a very similar meaning out of it. If it happened a day later, you would have gotten a similar meaning out of it. It doesn't matter. There's a gradient of time where the actual matterness of the thing happening would have still applied.
Sure. But it would have to happen. But it would have to happen within me living in that apartment. So I only stayed in that apartment, as you can imagine. I flew home and everything for like 5 days. So it has to happen within this sort of 5-day period. It also happens to be noticed right at this sort of like gathering of remembrance of Greg and mourning for Greg. So I know what you're saying. Like there would be meaning to it if I had noticed it earlier or something like that, or later. But the maximal meaning would not be there. It just seems too coincidental to be explained by naturalistic causes. But okay, this is what I was going to say. Any miracle can be naturally presumed away, just like you're doing now, which is fine. And I totally recognize that you have to do that, given your worldview. But
I actually think God makes them all natural.
Sure. If you want to define it, that's actually a good point. I watched a debate recently about, do we have to define miracles as
unnatural?
As unnatural, right? And you don't. You certainly don't have to, especially if God is real. Then it's actually the most natural thing is for him to have causal agency in our world.
To address Sean real quick, I don't believe in Aquinas' proposition that God is simple. In fact, if he's the justification for everything that currently exists, he must necessarily be either equal to or more complex than it. He's literally God plus he's literally existence plus an identity. If you want to even go further, he's technically separate from reality, although I don't think the Christians would believe that. I think it's like an intertwining of reality. Plus an identity. And then the Catholics would believe it's plus 3 identities.
Sure, 3 persons. But on the ultimate front, like in his sort of realm or whatever, he's oneness. He's totally simple. That's what they're saying. and then he creates multiplicity.
But he's oneness with the universe. That's the thing. He's oneness with the universe.
With
and
everything.
The universe is multiplicity.
Yeah, but only as perceived by only as perceived by us in the puddle, so to speak, or whatever. But it's not multiplicitous.
Right, well, then that means that the universe isn't multiplicitous. It's just perceived as such.
Right. Pretty much.
Then that means that the universe is divinely simple.
No, it just means God is divinely simple, and then on our level, it is perceived as multiplicity.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, is that you're saying that the universe is perceived as multiplicative. But if it's not in fact the case, then it's simple, which means we don't need God.
Okay, let's see what I have it up here. This is exactly your objection. It seems that God is not altogether simple, for whatever is from God must imitate him. Thus, from the first being are all beings, and from the first good is all good. But in the things which God has made, nothing is altogether simple. Therefore, neither is God altogether simple. Okay. I answer that the absolute simplicity of God may be shown in many ways. First, from the previous articles of this question, for there is neither composition or quantitative parts in God, since he is not a body, nor composition of matter and form, nor does his nature differ from his suppositum, nor his essence from his existence. Neither is there in him composition of genus and difference, nor of subject and accident. Therefore, it's clear that God is nowise composite, but altogether simple. Second, because every composite is posterior to its component parts and is dependent on them, but God is the first being, as shown above. So he's not dependent or on any other parts.
He's dependent on necessity and logic.
No, he just
like
is
everything
necessity.
else.
He just is necessity. He's not dependent on it.
What do you mean he's not? What, does he need to be necessary?
The definition of God is necessity. I mean, that's
right. He's limited by himself. It's not that he doesn't have parts. He absolutely has aspects of himself. In fact, other arguments in theism use this to justify his existence, such as the modal argument for his existence.
Okay. Okay, this is the direct reply to objection 1, which was your fundamental objection. Whatever is from God imitates him, as caused things imitate the first cause. But it is of the essence of a thing to be in some sort composite, because at least its existence differs from its essence, as will be shown hereafter.
Yeah. I don't think for a thing to be composite, it means it's necessarily more complex than the thing it came from. Isn't God just a composite one?
No, he's not composite. That's the point.
So he's made up of nothing?
He's made up of simply himself.
Right, so what is himself?
Then
because the universe is simply made up of itself. It's just a redefining of its properties, and I don't understand why you can just do that and say it's simple. Like, I am just myself. Am I divinely simple?
No, because yourself is made up of a bunch of different things, organs and mental things.
God is also made up of the limits of his self.
No. He just projects these sort of effects from his simple essence.
I project the same effects from the essence of me.
No. But part of your essence, part of your being is having a bunch of different parts. That's not part of
So you're
his
just saying, right, so the only thing that is like categorically different is that he's not necessary and I am. Or sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not necessary, he is.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely not necessary. There's many different ways that you could not be here.
I mean, I'd argue I am necessary, however.
I know.
But like that's essentially the category difference here, right? Is that he's necessary, I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay. Can God do anything other than make me? Can he have not made me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so he has the free will to not make me. Fine. That's fine. But I will say this. No made up is having parts. Yeah, but here's the thing. Does he not have parts? Because he absolutely has aspects. Like, he's made up of 3 persons. If you believe in the Christian worldview, he also has aspects. If you take the other arguments for theism, even in this vein, like you take the modal argument, they have to talk about his necessity.
These are all attributes. These are all attributes. These are not his essence. So his essence is simple. His attributes are multiplicitous. Certainly, there's the Trinity. There's creation, universe, everything. but the
right,
essence
but attributes
itself.
being a part of him is a composite of himself. I have an essence of self, and that doesn't mean I'm divinely simple.
Yeah, but your essence is not simple. Like, so your essence is different than God's.
The only difference between my essence and his essence is that he's necessary and I'm not. That's the only one. So you'd have to link it to
I wouldn't say that's the only one. I mean,
other than the scale, what's the difference?
Between your essence, between the essence of Infamous and the essence of God?
Yeah, like for instance, right? If you have God,
well, for one
right,
thing, simplicity.
Okay, well, circular argument. Anyway,
okay, fine.
The whole thing with him being simple is that he is necessary, because that's the only categorical difference between his essence and mine, and also he has an essence composed of things that he has either done or is, right? For instance, the properties of his three persons, or the things that he has done, like creation, like you mentioned a minute ago. Right?
Yeah, those are shadows of the essence. Those are properties coming down from the unity. But that doesn't say anything about the unity itself.
Properties coming down from the unity.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a cosmological claim that you're going to have to demonstrate.
Okay, this is another good sentence from Aquinas. And so since God is absolute form, or rather absolute being, as revealed to us, a lot of this also we have to accept is revealed by the Bible. So I am that I am is a revelation, not something we could, like, figure out, per se. And so since God is absolute form, or rather absolute being, he can be in no way composite. He is. He simply is, right?
Right, but you're just talking about the essence of something.
Yeah.
Right, the essence of me is simply me. Like, what's the difference between me just saying, I am me, and him saying he is God? You're just limiting it to one aspect, which is the meanness of the situation.
Okay.
Because I have aspects, right? Like, I have a heart, I have lungs, etc., etc. He has the same things, too. He has his deeds, he has his limitations, like, for instance, he can't, do things that are not logically contradictory, right? Think of that as his, like, mind, right? Like, he can't not be God. So, he has limitations of his essence, I have limitations of my essence. We both are described by our essence as the things we are not capable of doing, right? Because obviously I can't not be myself.
Right.
Right? I can't not do what I don't do.
Right.
So, our essence is described in the same way. The only difference is I am not necessary and he is. So it has to be linked to necessity in some way that makes him different.
Yeah. I mean, I do think he's linked to necessity that makes him different than us, but...
Okay, so what about necessity makes you divinely simple?
I'm not sure if that's what makes him divinely simple, but...
then what makes him divinely simple?
Well, I'd like to hear from Sean here, because Sean actually said the Trinity is not parts. There's a heresy called partialism, yeah. Let's not mention the Trinity, since the Trinity is really hard to understand. I agree.
Sure.
But he does say, no, God's simplicity is not revealed. So, Sean, in your understanding, how do we know about God's simplicity? Or should I read Aquinas a little more? Actually.
Oh, God.
I know you don't like this guy, but that's because he's smart.
And you think of God. This video is going to give 3 reasons in 5 minutes for why Christians should believe in divine simplicity. If you want a longer case, see this video, which I'll link to in the video description. Going to talk fast here. Number 1, divine simplicity is foundational to a biblical doctrine of God. So in the Bible, God is portrayed as supreme and unrivaled and transcendent. You think of God revealing his name to Moses as I am who I am, or the Apostle Paul saying that all things are from and
being part of the Bible is kind of irrelevant to this topic.
Okay, but... for a believer, this is going to be relevant, so.
Throughout the book of Isaiah, you think of these repeated declarations from God that I alone am God, I am the first and the last, there is no one like me, etc. It's from those kinds of passages that Christians have always affirmed God's aseity, meaning God exists from himself, God is not derived from anything external to himself, and God's absoluteness, meaning God is not conditioned by anything external to himself. And divine simplicity is important to uphold both of those doctrines as well as the general transcendence of God. Simplicity simply means that God is not made up of parts. God is not broken down into more basic ontological constituents. God is his attributes. So God is not merely loving and righteous, but but love and righteousness. And if we don't say that, if God merely instantiates his attributes, then in some sense, they would exist independently of him. God would not be utterly absolute and self-determined. It'd be like love and righteousness are just floating out here somehow, and then God comes along and just happens to correspond to them, and that won't do. So divine simplicity is necessary to protect the godness of God. Number two, divine simplicity is a nearly universal part of Christian witness and worship.
Yeah.
I don't really see an argument where, like, so one, even if this was simple, and even if it did matter, because I'm not, sold on the fact that divine simplicity necessarily matters because you take the extra step. But even if it did matter, how can you prove this?
Well, that's why I posited that it was a revelation. Sean is typing right now, so I'm curious where he derives the fact that it's not revealed from. But
I don't think it can be revealed, right? It would fucking kill you.
Well, maybe not the fullness, maybe not what it totally means, but to the highest extent that we can conceptualize God, I think we have to conceptualize him as simple. Otherwise, like Gavin Orland just said, we sacrifice the absoluteness and the aseity of God.
I don't think there's any question in the universe that we've ever gotten an answer to that was less complex than its question.
Well, God is certainly a unique answer.
Sure.
I agree with you. I perhaps agree with you on that. I would say this might be the only thing where the answer is less complex than the question. Perhaps.
Basically, among all Christians at all times, the great historical theologian Richard Mueller calls divine simplicity one of the normative assumptions of theology, basically in every era of church history. It's a kind of consensus doctrine, and not merely so as a philosophical appendage, but as a vital part of the witness of the church and the worship of the church. For example, in the late 2nd century, in his defense to the Roman emperors Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Commodus, yes, the emperors in the movie Gladiator, the early Christian apologist Athenagoras used divine simplicity to distinguish Christian theism from the polytheism of the day. He just assumed that's part of the Christian conception of God. Later, among the church fathers, divine simplicity was everywhere put to use to ground Trinitarianism as monotheistic. More on that in a moment. In the medieval era, divine simplicity was the first thing that Thomas Aquinas sought to establish about God after proving that he exists in the Summa Theologica. In Bonaventure's mystical theology, divine simplicity was so important for establishing that God can communicate with creatures. You know, a lot of modern theologians seem to have this idea that divine simplicity is a kind of static doctrine, slicing God off from meaningful relationship to creatures. But pre-modern theologians had the exact opposite instinct. Sum it up like this: Herman Bavinck, the great Reformed theologian, basically said Christian theology has always been conscious of its calling to teach God's simplicity. This is simply how we've always worshiped God. Reason number 3, divine simplicity establishes the Trinity as monotheistic, meaning we believe in one God. This is one of the great challenges against us. If we believe in the Trinity, that there are 3 persons in the Godhead, how can we still believe in only one God? Well, in recent years, a lot of theologians have tried to use this idea.
I mean, it is for why the Christian should believe in divine simplicity. I'm not sure if there is. Well, there's a critique here of Dr. Craig's view of divine simplicity. Maybe that would give some...
Sean said something.
Okay, let's see what Sean said.
Aquinas uses quotes from the scriptures to support his thesis, but does not rely only upon them. His first 26 questions in the Summas are about things provable by philosophy alone. Okay.
Oh, cool, yeah. 27 equals 3 times 3 times 3. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, Aquinas is sometimes a little is too dense for me to even understand or do it justice, really. But
yeah, I mean, from the video we watched, I just disagree that I disagree that sure, it might be necessary to believe certain things, but okay.
Right, and yeah, sure. So I don't think. Yeah, you're never going to come to divine simplicity before you come to a belief in God. I certainly grant you that. But I'm just saying, from my worldview, from my perspective, he must be simple. From the Christian perspective, more broadly, he must be simple.
Well, I mean, yeah, to avoid the Trinity problem, but like, and also to act as a justification for like things that are transcendent. I mean, I don't necessarily think you need something that's divinely simple for something that's transcendent. Like, if you had a justification for all of the logical absolutes that were just of a number less than the logical absolutes, I think that would be a better justification than them. But like, like it's, I don't see. First of all, I don't see how divine simpleness proves anything. I don't see how it can be proved, and I don't see how it's useful to anything outside of the Christian world.
Okay, fair enough. I don't even remember how exactly we got to it, but
I think the first time we got to it was literally when we got back to the transcendentals, and we were like, okay, well, he's divinely simple, therefore he's a better explanation than just simply being.
Right.
Which I disagree with, because like you're taking an extra step to answer a question, which means necessarily it's not as good of an answer if they just justify themselves. Because if you're claiming, you know, they justify, if you're claiming both answers justify themselves, not taking the step is simpler. There's just less factors in the causal chain.
But you have to presume more things to be necessary if you take your view than
more things to be necessary, but less things.
I guess, yeah, it's sort of like that would just be to deny the divine simplicity, but fair. Fine.
No. Even if I accept the divine simplicity, it's still like an extra step you're taking, right?
Well, if you presume the divine simplicity, then you're not taking any extra step. You're just describing the nature of God.
No, you are taking an extra step. The extra step is the reason. That's an extra step. It's a causal step. Like, he's the cause for these things to exist. He's the instantiation of these things.
Right, but that cause is total one. It subsumes everything. I mean, it explains everything. So yeah, I guess I see what you're saying, but it's not. It doesn't have a numerical value. Like, it doesn't have, like, it's not like a thing like the other things. It's the one.
Well, no,
simple,
I mean, God is definitely a
thing
because he's. I mean, he's definitely a thing. But like the whole thing with, like, I'll put it to you like this, and I used this analogy last time because it's the only kind of example I can really think of. You could have infinite things on that causal chain, right? Like, let's say we got down to the logical absolutes. That's the tier of existence we're talking about, right? Not like your dog and shit, right?
Yeah,
it's just like that tier, the transcendentals.
Yeah.
You could have infinite transcendentals be self-justified and affirm that belief, and it still would not equate to you adding a step and saying one of them is necessary, because it's saying the adding of a step is an infinite and beyond a leap. It's like adding another dimension to 2D. No matter how many 2D sheets you have, like, no matter how many transcendentals you have, you can never get to the next dimension, which would be adding an answer.
Right.
Now, whether or not it's correct is different, right? Obviously, we can't prove it's a fucking.
So, by your logic, should we deny, like, the fourth dimension and the fifth dimension and the sixth dimension, all these things?
No, actually, we've observed those.
Right. I would say we've observed God, but okay. So what is the point? Like, so you're saying because
you can't use
because infinite 2D sheets
to get to 3D.
Because you can't use infinite 2D sheets to create a three-dimensional object. Which is, I guess, true.
Yeah, it's just
where do you derive that? Where do you get that from?
Okay, I'll put it to you like this: run an infinite distance with infinite speed. Will you reach the fourth dimension?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
probably not. I don't know, but
yeah, probably not.
Probably
you'll experience time differently, 100%, because you're going beyond the speed of light. But like, you won't reach the fourth dimension.
Yeah, I wonder actually. I don't know how you can make that statement totally.
Well, because the fourth dimension, I'm not talking about a fourth temporal dimension. I'm talking about a fourth spatial dimension. I'm not talking about time.
Well, I'm not even sure if space is like relevant. So I guess I see what you're saying.
Well, it's not directly relevant. I'm talking about the comparison between dimensions. I'm not. It's a comparison in that way, not a comparison in like, oh, God lives in this other dimension.
Yeah.
So like, no matter how many things that you have.
But what if God is just like the first dimension or something like that? What if he's less? What if he's the building blocks upon which all the other things come?
What if he is in the first dimension and the other dimensions are? So, I mean, I think that would necessarily be saying that things are more complex than God.
Yeah, well, they certainly are. That is the view, at least. That is the.
But also and bigger than God. Like
no.
If they,
well, like
so,
you
okay,
said, they're
wait,
not.
I
They're
have a
not like
question.
comparable. Like you can't have.
So
you know.
I do have a question about the complexity thing now that I think about it.
Yeah.
If God is the maximized, like,
actuality,
doesn't he have to be? Yeah, doesn't he have to be maximally complex?
No, I don't think so.
Why?
If he's actuality of itself, if he is simply being itself, does he have to be maximally complex?
Well, yeah, because I think you could definitely argue, right, that complexity is a good thing in some cases.
Sure.
And if God is an all-knowing creature, complexity doesn't affect him in the same way that it would us for, like, you know, obviously something can be too complex, right? Like, and be bad for us.
Yeah.
But not for him. So if he was absolutely... God is not a point. Shut the fuck up.
Well, if there's a level of if complexity is on any level bad, then he couldn't have any bad complexity. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, like you can be too good in certain cases, right? Like if you were like, let's say, like, oh, I forgive this guy who's about to stab me. Like he stabs you, I'm like, oh, it's okay, I forgive you. Like it's like there's a level of forgiveness that's too bad, but you would accept
that's what Jesus
he's
does.
Like infinite. Right, but you would accept. I mean, yeah, but that's Jesus.
Yeah,
but also,
and so, but I would never say that what Jesus did was bad. So that if you were the most good that you could be, then fine.
I agree, but it would be bad for humans to do, right? There is a level of like quote unquote good that would be unacceptable for a human to do. That got to be like, you shouldn't have done that. Like for instance, like you letting yourself be stabbed to death just because you wanted to be like, it's okay, you can stab me.
Yeah. That would not be the fullness of goodness. You'd have some sort of like narcissism, or you'd have some sort of like weird like negation of your own value or something, which would not be good.
Right. But so there is a level of good acts or goodness that is bad, right? Which I mean, you alluded to earlier, right? Two goods can make a bad and stuff, right?
Yeah, sure.
So my main thing is that if there is a limitation for how much good can be, there's also a limitation for how complex something can be while still being good. And I don't think that there is anything complex enough to, like, let's say, confuse God.
Right, sure.
So if there's nothing complex enough to confuse God, he would have to be maximally complex because he literally isn't affected by it in any way. It's never going to be bad for him. Like sin, him being sinful, that would be against his nature.
Just because he can perceive, just because he can perceive and even create complexity doesn't make himself complex.
No, I mean, I agree. I'm not saying that he would necessarily be complex because of this,
right.
But I don't know what answer you could give that would necessarily remove complexity from him as a good attribute.
Yeah,
because you have to admit that the complexity is a good attribute in some cases.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, sure. That's why I hold to divine simplicity as a revelation. And it's I know that Sean said that this is all proven strictly philosophically, but that's not so clear to me. But I'm also not an Aquinas scholar, so maybe there's something. I'm not really a philosopher, so maybe there's something.
I have to make a role for Sean, Aquinas scholar.
I know, for real. So he starts with like the way he argues. So if he starts with the body, it is absolutely true that God is not a body, and this can be shown in three ways. No body is in motion unless it be put in motion, as is evident from induction. Now, it has already been proved that God is the first mover and is himself unmoved. So, we'd have to read the whole thing, basically. But if we presume that philosophically this sort of boils down well...
Sean said there's a mistranslation here.
Oh, there is? Yeah, we could look at the actual Latin.
How the fuck do you know that there's a mistranslation?
Sean studied the actual Latin in his school, he told me.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
I know Latin? Oh my god.
Points enter into the composition of things, but God can't enter into the composition of anything.
God can't enter into the composition of anything. Depends on your Christianity, dude.
I guess, like... What Sean? Well, isn't that what was just sort of refuted, or? I thought he could.
I don't know.
I don't know. Now we're getting so deep, and I actually, unfortunately, have to go really soon. Okay, let's do.
Oh, before you do, I need you to create an owner role in the server and give it to yourself so people know who owns the server.
Oh, okay. I'll do that. I'll do that right now.
Yeah, no, I mean you don't have to do it right now, but like
I'll do it right after. I'll do it right after I end the stream. I wanted to end on a quick Dillahunty getting triggered video, which is kind of funny, and it doesn't have any theological or philosophical value in my view. It's just kind of like a.
Is it new or old?
It's new, I think, or maybe it's like a couple years old. But Dillahunty, and it's this guy who I actually don't like. I think he's. I know I gave the title of Rage Bait to
this guy.
Yeah,
is it the
this
one
guy.
where he like was like, I'm not going to appear on the channel anymore.
This is an in-person debate that they have, and Dillahunty literally walks out.
Yeah, I have seen this. Yeah, I've seen this.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna see.
I hate that guy. He's fucking infuriating.
No, he is infuriating to me too, but just a funny little thing to end it off on.
Are the foundation of secular humanism. There is no list of thou shalt not or thou shalts, because we recognize that nearly every attempt at such a list fails at some point as we learn more about our world and about getting better at understanding the world better, about doing better, and being better in this life. The goal of humanism is a free and universal society in which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good. If you have an objection to that or a better goal, what is it?
All right, thank you so much for your introductory statement. We're going to hand it over to Andrew Wilson for 10 minutes. So thank you for being here, Andrew, and the floor is yours.
You're welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew Wilson. I am the host of the one and only Crucible, the fastest growing.
Okay.
There's a few ways this debate can go. The topic is Christian ethics versus secular humanism.
Yes, that's why I don't like him, because he literally gets like OnlyFans girls on. He's like, you should be ashamed of yourselves. It gives me this like evangelical.
It makes women cry, dude.
Yeah, like shame ridden. It's just not how Jesus at all would treat these women. And then he has one OnlyFans girl on who is a converted Christian, and she has the most brilliant response to him. But then he still keeps treating her like a slut or whatever. Not that that's intrinsically bad, but his view of it and the shame attached to that and whatever. And so she's converted, and he goes, well, if you were lying to all these guys while you were still an OnlyFans model and you were really like, getting to know Christ and all that stuff, why should we think that you're not lying now? And then she literally quotes the scripture, which he never does. And then she says,
what I would have quoted, dude? How many times should we forgive them? Not 70. Not
Right.
7, but 70 times 7.
And that would be a great thing to quote. I think she quotes an even stronger one. You'll know them by their fruits. And she basically just says, well, if you think I'm lying, then evaluate whether you think I'm lying, and that's okay. But then he just keeps treating her like whatever.
Evaluate whether you think I'm lying, but at the end of the day, the ultimate judge is the only one who will judge.
Exactly. And and I thought that was a very balanced and pretty much the only response to give to that type of question, when he's like calling into question her entire faith, her entire worldview, everything about it.
Also, one thing I do want to say just before we continue, and I noticed this just before, because I really like watching a lot of faith videos are coming out recently for the lore. Miriam Bell is a nun, and Jesus's best friend was a prostitute.
Miriam Bell.
So Miriam Bell is the mother in the Unholy Trinity.
Oh, right.
She was a nun. And it's really weird for the devil to have a nun, but it's also really weird for Jesus to have a prostitute.
that's another really good inversion. Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
So he inverts in every way possible.
Every way he inverts. No, that's great. Yeah. I think that's a really theologically interesting game, and does portray the devil very accurately, or
spiteful.
Yeah, totally spiteful. Yeah, the nun. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool.
Yeah.
Like
also, who was the prostitute again? I can't remember her name off the top of my head.
Mary Magdalene. Well, there's a few. I mean, they say Mary Magdalene had
Mary Magdalene is the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
Demons driven out of her, and I think it's implied that she's the prostitute that put the ointment on Jesus' feet. To which it's brought up like, well, if Jesus knew that she was a prostitute, then why is he letting her do this? And then he responds to this person's thought in his head, and the guy's like, whoa, what the? That's pretty funny.
No, the also the similarity of the names Mary Magdalene, Miriam Bell.
Oh yeah, Miriam Bell, Mary Magdalene. Yeah, Miriam Bell. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think Miriam is
yeah.
sort of a derivative of the Mary as a name in certain languages. Yeah.
Yeah. And as for this guy, this fucking piece of shit right here.
Yeah.
Jesus' best friend was a prostitute.
Exactly.
You are making fun of and shaming people who Jesus unironically hung out with and respected.
100%.
Who touched his body.
100%. Yeah. No, I totally agree, and that's why I don't like Andrew Wilson. To be clear.
Yeah.
So this is basically like two people who's at least in the modern Dillahunty, two people whose debate tactics I don't particularly respect, and Andrew's more so than Dillahunty's, but then they kind of clash in this really aggressive way, which is interesting to watch.
The funny thing is, I already won that topic because, as Matt explained to Jay Dyer, he has no justification under the skeptical belief structure to give an accounting for any meta-ethical presupposition he may
Didn't
have.
admit to that at all.
He just kind of grants himself stuff. He grants himself logic, he grants himself reason, he grants himself an entire worldview, even though he's using an unjustified starting position for it. So I'm not honestly all that interested in doing the God not real dough debate because one, it's boring, and two, it's also really boring. It goes like this. I don't see enough evidence and remain unconvinced there's a God. Then I say, but you use a theistic worldview of justification like there is a God to grant yourself logic and everything else.
But
So instead of that, I'm just going to grant Matt's entire worldview. 2/3 or more of of this entire planet are all operating inside of a shared delusion that they were created by a sky daddy who loves him some slavery and murderousness. He thinks it's funny to kind of cosmically with people. That's his deal, kind of his whole thing. That's Matt's worldview. So now Matt's right, and the question becomes, should we let them to continue to believe in this nonsense?
Well, I think he's saying his worldview is that Sky Daddy not real. Sky Daddy loves murder, slavery, that type of thing.
Yeah, no, it's just that he's like, oh, he believes this guy likes murder, and he's like, he doesn't believe this guy's fucking real, my man.
Oh, right. Yeah, that would be more accurate. Yeah.
Stone Age madness, or do we stop them from engaging in it? My contention is, even if God isn't real at all, that people acting as though he is still superior to whatever nonsensical egalitarian worldview Matt can come up with. See, Matt also just acts as though the things he believes are true. He believes, and therefore acts as though logic is real, math is real. Everything is real based on his presuppositional belief that they are real. You see, human flourishing, the cornerstone of Matt's ideology and that of secular humanism, is totally meaningless. Flourishing by whose metric? From my perspective, for instance, attempting to lie to people who claim men can be women isn't human flourishing. From Matt's perspective, it is. Why? Why should the collective of humanity lie?
Yeah.
So one thing I do want to say is because I've recently come into some knowledge about it, and I think that we could have a cool dialogue about it. Is what are your opinions on trans women? Or trans women and men? I don't care about sport. We can never even talk about sport. I don't care about it. Okay. So whatever people want to do with their bodies in sport, I don't give a shit. Kicking a ball across a field is stupid.
Yeah. In terms of sport, I mean, I know you don't want to talk about it, but that's the only like area of this debate where I will forcefully apply any part of my worldview to say that there should not be men in women's sports, particularly really physical ones like boxing. I just think that leads to bad effects.
Agree.
And I think most people would agree with that, and the culture largely.
I would agree, but they're not men.
Right. I'm sorry. I should say people who have a unfair advantage, like we outlaw steroids, for example. So if you spend 18 years with higher levels of testosterone and muscle density and muscle gain, and you can physically really hurt your opponent in this kind of unfair advantage, then I think that should be curbed and stopped. In terms of can like a man transition into a woman?
To be very clear, I want to define woman.
Okay. Yeah, go for it. How do you define woman?
So my definition of a woman would be anyone who identifies as a woman, and that's it.
Okay. And does that only apply to the categories of man and woman, or can you kind of identify in any realm that you choose?
Well, so in the terms of non-binary people, I think that non-binary just simply means that it's not a binary, right? So you could be something else, right?
Okay.
The main thing that I wanna shed light on is because I've recently come across the science that supports this.
Okay.
And so a lot of people on the right will say like, oh, they're denying science, et cetera, et cetera. But even if we talk about science in the way that we talk about gender and sex, right? So realistically here, we're going to be talking about sex, but I do want to emphasize that it really doesn't have anything to do with gender. It's just a stronger argument to people who deny that trans people exist.
Right.
Which is people can be born with physical like, okay, for instance, all the definitions, all of them, of women biologically don't work. None of them work because there's always an exception. And as long as there is one exception, the definition is not holistic and therefore does not work.
Well, we have this common saying in the language that the exception that proves the rule.
Right, but that doesn't mean anything when we're talking about actual definitions, especially in biology.
No, I think it
or
does.
in sociology.
No, I think it does.
Well,
There's
for
always
instance,
an
right,
exception.
like
There's always an exception
mammals,
that proves
right?
the rule, no matter how sort of scientific.
No, what's a mammal that isn't a mammal?
Okay, I mean there are some things that probably have no exception, but I guess a mammal that.
And I think that this is one of those.
Well,
things.
no, you know what?
Like,
You know
for
what?
instance,
A mammal that isn't a mammal would be the shared common ancestor of both mammals and whatever the next thing is, reptiles or whatever.
Well, it wouldn't be a mammal or it would be. That's the thing, is that mammals have a very strict description, right? The only difference with man and woman here is that we've had previous descriptions that we found out later don't
Well,
work.
no, mammals don't. The mammals
being
do not have a very strict. Because what is a platypus?
a platypus.
Platypus lay eggs. There's actually a few different mammals that lay eggs, and that is explicitly not part of the definition of a mammal. But there's an exception that proves the rule.
Right, but except the mammal doesn't say they have to give birth to live young. It says typically they give birth to live young.
That's what I'm saying. So it's not that strict of a definition, is it?
No, because it's a warm-blooded vertebrate animal of a class that is distinguished by the presentation of hair or fur, females that secrete milk or for the nourishment of the young, and typically the birth of the live young.
Okay, then I'm gonna say a human woman is a Homo sapien, lady that can give birth to young.
You'd say female.
What's that?
I'd say you'd say female.
Okay, fine. A female that typically has XY chromosomes.
Okay, cool. That's actually a perfectly fine definition, and the reason I want to bring that up is because XY chromosomes have nothing to do with the presentation of gender in our social normative experience. The reason for that is the existence of intersex people or people who have different chromosomes. Because you have to think about it, intersex people are always examined as oh, this person is 1% of the population. Cool. We can now talk about other examples of people who exist in the realm where there's different biology to your presentation. For instance, women who are born with XY chromosomes but still have a vagina and present as women. I think you would agree that they are women.
Yeah.
Right? There you go. They have XY chromosomes. By your definition, they should be a man.
Oh, I mixed up. So XY is man and XX is woman?
Yeah, I actually used to think that when I was in school as well. I thought XY was woman because I thought Y was a more womanly letter.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I think in my mind that's why I did too. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying there are people with XX chromosomes. I'm sorry, XY chromosomes that are born with a vagina and breasts and things.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
There are people that have chromosomes that are female presenting in every secondary sexual characteristic or primary.
Really?
Yeah. I don't remember what the disease is called. You can look it up for yourself. There are absolutely people who have XY chromosomes that have vaginas or have secondary sex characteristics when they hit puberty. This even extends to brain states, right? And I know a lot of people simplify it to, you have a male brain inside of a female body. It's a lot more complex than that, but essentially what exists is the male brain is determined alongside the sex of the body, and sometimes in embryonic development those are misaligned.
Okay.
So you will have developed a male brain, essentially, right? Obviously, there's some hormonal differences, right? You need certain hormones to make the genitals.
Yeah.
But so, and then you'll have the genitals of the opposite sex, right? Non-binary. You will not be in the binary. You are neither technically or socially. But if you want to be a woman, no one's going to say that nothing if you have a vagina and boobs. Right. Or if you're the opposite way around, you want to present as a man, no one's going to say anything. So it's obviously not either socially or biologically based on your chromosomes.
Okay.
Right. So that's the first definition of the biological states that don't work. And then the other one is, your sex characteristics, like your genitals, shit like that, right? And again, you can just have those be the opposite way around and still identify as like a male, right? Like in these exact same scenarios.
Yeah.
And so that one doesn't work. So what really is a female or a woman, and what really is a man or a male, right? At the end of the day, it's kind of what you line up with. Is if you want to present as it, that's fine. So like trans people do exist in the way that the exception. First of all, they're a lot more than 1%, right?
Okay.
Second of all, because there's just so many different like forms of the reasons that this could swap, right? Like I bet you haven't heard of the whole XY, then different genitalias thing. That's not intersex, for instance.
Right.
And intersex already accounts for like 1% of the population or something like that. I think it's less. It's probably less. But like either way, there's this large group of people who just don't actually have like an alignment in biology for female or male, right? There's a typicality, but there isn't a totality. And so I feel like if there isn't a totality or a typicality and there's this many features, I feel like it opens the realm for non-binary because it's not a binary. Every time we have like an animal that has 3 sexes, for instance, like hermaphroditic animals that can swap between male and female. That's
I know
not
those.
binary. Yeah, that's not binary. And so we have a similar type of biology where we have these disagreements between our brain or our alleles and our genitals. So there's so many of those things that it has to be the case that there is not a binary. It is not one or the other. There is not 2 sets of things that all humans fall into. Therefore, there's not a binary.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It looks like this is just a random. Maybe I can actually click on the website.
Oh wow, it gives you links now.
Yeah, it does. Okay. Sure.
I don't care about it. Who fucking is that? But sure.
$200, whatever.
$200 is crazy.
That's insane. I guess there's a free version. I don't know. So I don't even know what this is. Well, more importantly, this is not a topic that I ever really engage with or think deeply about. So I wasn't aware of many of these things, but I also was never holding a picket sign out front of a trans person's house going, "You're a woman or a man." It was sort of always my intuition that there was a separation between gender expression and like your straight sex organs or whatever. Like for instance, I am a more effeminate man than many other men, and my ex-girlfriend was a more masculine woman than many other women. And so I'm aware of the spectrum of like presentation that exists within people. Fundamentally though, I think it's fair to say that
there's a lot of cis men and cis women. I agree.
Yeah, after I make this point, Henry, I'll let you talk because I'm sure you have some unhinged perspective on this. So basically the question is, how do you conform most appropriately to your self, like to your the truest expression of yourself? And so if you are born into one of these situations where you truly are not a man or a woman, any of the numerous ones that you presented to me, then perhaps it's probably proper to go about your life and try to identify yourself with that nuance of what you actually are. But for the vast majority of people, they are either a man or a woman. And I think sometimes what happens is that people get confused, and when they're really young, like 13, 14, 12, and they realize that like a tomboy or tom girl or whatever it is, realize that they have this sort of spectrum, this variety of personalities, male and female, that are competing for like primal attention within their true self, the totality of themselves. And then I think what happens is they express that, and the culture sometimes, not always, encourages them to have some sort of radical surgery or transformation process when that's not always necessary. So I'm against like.
I do agree that they're not always necessary.
I would say usually not necessary, but.
So like it depends. Like I don't think there's these many people having these life-changing surgeries. That's the thing, is that like a lot of the people who are just like, hey, I want to like get this life-changing surgery, I want to have like hormone blockers, et cetera, et cetera. First of all, the studies on hormone blockers have actually been proven to like not be permanent, at least up to 4 years, which is a lot of the time the maximum that they get before
so you
surgery.
Think you think there's at least one situation where a 13-year-old should be put on hormone blockers?
There is some situation. I mean, if they're trying to kill themselves, I'm just gonna give it to them, dude. I'm not even gonna lie to you. If they're actively like three times trying to kill themselves, yeah, fucking have it, dude. Like, I just don't want you to die. And if that leads to you wanting to kill yourself in the future, is there really anything we could have done? Like, not really. You have a fucking gun to your head.
I mean, there's probably some, if they're really trying to kill themselves that many times, by the time they're 13, there's probably usually there's some sort of sexual trauma or horrific parenting. There's probably
some kind of underlying trauma. I agree, but you asked if I could imagine some sort of
situation. Yeah, I'm gonna say there's no. I would condone making it illegal to give anyone under the age of 18, just because we don't allow children to consent to sex, which rightly so, by the way, until they're 18 or 16 or 17 or whatever. I think you certainly shouldn't allow them to consent to gender defining like radical surgeries and hormone blockers.
You were talking about the resurrection of Christ.
We were, and now we're at the end of the stream.
We're at the end of the stream
as these things go, 3 hours in. So what's your take, Henry? Let's hear it.
Well, I think the resurrection's big cap.
Okay.
Definitely didn't happen. I think it's ridiculous.
Okay, but you don't have it.
I remember one of the problems I had with overall religion I discussed to you, and you like had an okay answer.
Yeah.
But I still believe in this, and infamous, you can hear this out, because I just had like this thought like in the middle, then I knew it was stressing me out, so I had to talk to him.
Yeah.
But my thing is like, let's say you go to heaven. There has to be like some end of consciousness. No one wants to live forever, you know? There has to be a point where you like say to God, like, okay, I'm ready to forget I ever existed and just peacefully drift away, whatever the fuck.
It would just make you forget that you exist, and then
exactly.
you're
and in my book, in my logic, that's death.
You just wouldn't want to
that's
not exist.
that's what death is, straight up.
Well, no, he would just make you forget. Like, if, for instance, if you were immortal, right, and you like, straw on camel's back, right? 3 weeks was the difference between you wanting to live and then wanting to kill yourself, right? I'm just gonna make you forget the 3 weeks.
Yeah,
I didn't undo who you were.
I mean, I think the better way to see it
is
that there's no sense in, you have the fullness of life in heaven. There's no sense where you would ever desire death.
Bro, but I'm telling you, it's like, but like.
Well, I know you can't, as a human being, as like on this mortal coil, that you can't imagine that. But I'm saying that the classical conception of heaven and God is that you want to be around forever. And you don't even experience time like that. You're living this like.
Why would you want to be around forever, bro? You would literally tell all the jokes.
So what makes you want to die? What makes you want to die?
There's no new president to get elected that you can make fun of.
No, but there would be infinite jokes. There'd be infinite presidents to make fun of. There would be
I don't think
infinite
there are
whatever you want. There would be all.
I don't think there are infinite jokes.
That's what I think.
That's what I'm saying. But heaven is not like Earth. It's not like this realm. Also,
right, but do you agree that he doesn't have? So I'm gonna just argue on Henry's side here.
Yeah.
You agree that he can do all things, not infinite things, right?
Okay, sure, yeah.
So there's a limited amount of things that can be done.
Right. There aren't like square circle jokes. Fair enough. Fine.
Well, I mean, yeah, like examples like that, but there are limited things that you can do, right? There's at some point you will have done everything.
I guess maybe
because you're in heaven.
Yeah, I also think there's a different. I think
you'll get to the point where it's like,
I think the perception of time.
And that's what death is. That's why I feel like there can't be a God, because death just replaces the fucking afterlife for me.
Now I will agree with Streets here, where I think that if you start with, the first thing, and then at the end you're just like, I want to wrap around to the first thing again. I think that also makes sense. Like you know, when you do one thing, it's not like you never revisit it.
Yeah, and also like you're thinking of time in this most three-dimensional human way, where time passes. Well, fourth, whatever. Dimension. Yeah, shadow, fourth dimension. Whereas I think the classical conception, my conception of it, is that you wouldn't even have this perception of like time passing. You just live. You just are life.
That's even worse.
You have the fullness of life and everything. So
it's even worse. I can't even die.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn off the camera. I don't like it. I did want to ask you a couple questions while I had you here. Okay. I'm interested in selling my youngest daughter into slavery as sanctioned in Exodus.
Oh my God! Shut up with that stupid movie.
Speaks fluent Italian and always cleared the table when it was her turn.
What price would she fetch? Like,
Exodus 35:2 clearly says that he should be put to death if my chief of staff works on the Sabbath. Reese, what do you think of that?
I think you should probably. I think you should probably put him to death. You idiot. I mean, of course, I don't agree with the Mosaic laws of Exodus 34.
Seriously.
Yeah, and you know, whatever you came of, when Henry stands, nobody sits.
Yeah. Wait. So, what is the question? Should you or anyone or any Christian follow the old Mosaic laws?
He's quoting a fucking movie.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
It's from the West Wing.
Yeah, he's
quoting from the West Wing. Oh, right. Do you also hate America?
I think that's, if you were gonna hate America, now's a really good fucking time.
Every time's a good time. What did we do recently?
A lot.
I feel like America's as good as it's ever been.
Oh, really?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's as good as it's ever been. Gets rid of the Department of Education.
Well, we already talked. I'm not getting into this. We already talked about how the Department of Education is useless and makes our education system worse. But anyway.
Now, universally, if the state decides not to teach 1 + 1, they have that right.
Well, good. People should have more rights. I believe in freedom.
Okay, fuck that. First of all, no one believes in actual freedom. No one wants freedom.
I know. Yeah, I just actually have to go, so it's hard to get into a deep political discussion about the Department of Education or the Mosaic laws.
Yeah,
but
me out. It feels dumb and gay. I'm out.
Yeah. So anyway, on the point of transgender rights, in the cases where I think we should reduce harm, I think we should try to understand people and help them. I think there's very few situations where it's proper for a child to have beta blockers. Actually, I think there's probably 0 situations where we can make that decision for them, because that ultimately
I don't think there's 0 decisions, but
because
they don't
have informed consent, unless you want to say that 13-year-olds can consent to sex and other things, and this is more than sex. It's
no,
neutering them.
It's different. Can you? So first of all, can you get invasive surgery for your kid if they need it?
Yeah. The question is if they need it.
This is invasive surgery. And they need it.
But you don't know. But nobody knows that they need it, and a lot of the statistics say that they have a higher chance of committing suicide after they get it. So I don't know.
First of all, no 13-year-old is getting beta blockers. That's just not happening.
That is happening.
It has happened. If it has happened in any case, it is by far not allowed. It shouldn't happen.
Right. And so that's what I agree with.
Should have a gun, unless that person has a gun to their head at 24/7.
Sure, I guess, yeah.
Wait, I laughed at square circle jokes. Thus, there are no square circle jokes. Being itself a square circle.
That's a good point. That's very funny, Sean.
That's good.
That's a great point, actually.
But beta blockers are usually put around the age of 16. That's usually when they get prescribed. Again, there needs to be a history of this kind of behavior. It's not that the doctor just goes, "No, you should get this." That's not what doctors do.
When people are consenting adults, I think they should, have a wider range of decisions. I think the main debate is around people with unfair advantages in sports competitions, which I agree that there should not be those unfair advantages, and when you start to do radical surgeries and beta blockers and things like that to children. That's where I take my stand. On the other parts of it, is it biblical? Is it acceptable? Is it this? Is it that? It's not really for me to make those decisions. And if I eventually learn something that gives me an actual take on this, then I'll present that to you. But I don't really know what my take is on this. I don't really know where I'm supposed to stand or what's right or the most truthful thing. Of course, I have trans friends. I recognize that I'm not one of these people that's gonna say trans people aren't real. That doesn't even make sense to me. Like, it's like saying, they're real. They exist. I see them. Yeah. I know them. Yeah, it's like saying gay people aren't real. So typically, I don't even know if I can say this fully, but typically the trans people that I know have very chaotic, traumatic pasts. And that's what I would like to see eliminated. But
also,
not them.
The one thing I will say about the chaotic, traumatic stuff is that it's not because they're transgender. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
That they, it's because people view them in a certain way because they're transgender. Like, that's the difference.
Or even prior to that, people viewing them as transgender, usually it's some sort of like horrific childhood, like a bad parentage or sexual trauma or something like that, or even bullying on a different front of like being a little, presenting differently than your classmates or something like that.
Right, but also at the same time, I don't want to pretend like if you're a tomboy, the doctor will give you beta blockers.
But and that's what I want to prevent. And I'm not saying that happens all the time. I'm not saying that's a common occurrence. But I just want to make sure that can't happen. And it looks like the culture is starting to accept that as a possibility. I don't think that should be a possibility.
So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm in a lot of these communities. Nobody thinks 13-year-olds should be able to do that.
Okay,
Not a single one of us.
Good.
And if a doctor ever prescribes that, it's the doctor that's the issue.
And I agree. It's the doctors that should be held accountable, not the children or the parents or anybody.
Right. So, and to be very clear, I think that 16-year-olds, 100%, if they could be emancipated from their parents, should be able to make the decision to start beta blockers, as they don't do anything past 4 years.
Yeah.
So if you want to stop halfway through, you'll be 18. That's perfectly fine.
Right.
You'll continue puberty up until you're 24.
Right. Yeah.
So
and I would just encourage people to think really deeply about it as well. What's right for them and what's, how to live most in accordance with their sort of the fullness of their self. And I don't think, I mean, we already agree, but, children just don't have that ability, I don't think.
Well, so, like, it depends what you mean by children, because everyone always uses children, and then, like, some people are like, oh, I mean a 6-year-old. It's like, that's not what a child is in this situation.
Right. I mean, I'm going to say, like, 13-year-olds are children.
Sure. I think that's more of an honest answer than some of these, like, Republicans give, like, where they're just like, oh, they're saying child, but what they really mean is, like, 4 fucking years old and like 6
certainly
years old.
If they're 4 or 5 or 6 or something, then that's just obviously wrong.
Nobody is that mentally degraded.
So I don't think anybody really advocates for that position. And to the people that do, they're horribly misguided.
I just think that the people that say children without saying, like, because a lot of people on the left will say the years, right? That's the thing I've noticed. Whereas a lot of people on the right will say child. And child evokes a very different feeling than 13 to 16 years old.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
So I think
I still don't think it makes it right for it to be a 13-year-old getting this kind of procedure, but
I would agree. But let's be honest, if that's in the range, I think it's better than like a fucking 4-year-old.
It is.
And like obviously,
there's gradients.
Yeah, and like I do think that there is a situation in which a 13-year-old could start beta blockers, because again, it's 4 years for it to take permanent effect. You could stop after 1 and then continue to go through puberty. You could stop after 2 and then continue to go through puberty. It gives you a couple years to be able to figure it out and go through therapy for it. Extra therapy, by the way,
why not
because they don't get prescribed.
Yeah, but why not just wait then?
Oh, because the other hormones will kick in and your biology will be changed permanently quicker.
But so then, to me, it's like, I don't know, you're biologically...
You're basically stalling it. You're stalling the change, so you're not sure.
I think, because we were talking before about the fringe cases of people whose biologies are like, they present as a woman, but they have these chromosomes and everything. So it's like, I think you should try out your own body first, honestly. I just feel that way. And so, if you're 18 and whatever, and you figure it out, or maybe whatever consent is, 16 or 17... and you go, I've tried out my own body, my post-pubescent body, or, mid-pubescent body, and it's just detestable to me, and I want to kill myself all the time. It's like, that might be a different story, but it's like you have a body, is messing around with it really the first thing we should go to. I don't think so.
But some people just hate it, dude. Like that's the thing, is that living in it is torture.
And it's hard for
like,
me to even
obviously that's
imagine
not all
that.
of
So I recognize that I have a limited ability to grasp what it's actually like to have body dysmorphia like that. I do think typically that type of body dysmorphia comes from some other trauma not related to their gender or sex, because truly as a child, up until a certain point, you don't even have a conception at all of being different than a girl or having a different gender or sex. You know, like
so one thing is that like a lot of people who are tomboys or a lot of people who are like feminine men, right? Who grow up that way, sure, just like sometimes they're just tomboys, sometimes they're just guys that like to play with dolls, right? Sometimes that's the case. I watched Barbie as a kid a lot of the time, right? So that was my shit.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
But I knew I wasn't trans, right? Despite
yeah,
me
exactly.
not even knowing what that was.
I loved Totally Spies. As a
Bro,
kid.
I love Totally Spies as well, dude. Winx Club and shit. But like, but like, that's the thing, is that like it's very obvious when you know that, when it's like defined as like actual torture to in your teenage year, because again, it's teenage years where this really affects your mental health. It's not really when you're like fucking 12, right?
Right. Which is why I
so
wouldn't
like in your
start
teenage
it,
years, when it's like you're basically living in torment, where your body doesn't feel like it's yours and you just want to tear all of it off, because that's what my friends have described. I just don't want any of it. I want it gone. Right. It's like having a suit on that's too tight constantly.
But then again, it's like my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend had described that exact same experience, and it was related to her sexual trauma of being raped and having been abused in a sense where she just preferred not to have any parts and not to be perceived by anybody. But then her answer for herself that she found was not to become trans. It was to sort of try to understand her trauma and untangle it and stuff like that. So it's like,
I agree with
just
you, but
because you
in that situation,
have
it was
this
actually
sense
a cause.
doesn't mean necessarily that you are in the wrong body. I think more often than not, you're in the body that is probably more apt to growing yourself as a greater concept.
Oh yeah, most of the time that is true, right? There's more cis people than there is trans people.
Well,
right?
of course, yeah.
But
even
and
people
so
that
what I
might
would
be
think-
trans, I think there might be a percentage of people that are trans that would not have been if the culture hadn't been so propulsionary of going through with this whole thing without totally knowing all the implications.
So I think there is some proportion. I don't think it's large, in the same way that a lot of people will be like, okay, intersex people don't matter because it's not a large proportion. So I think that, especially the right, that kind of pick and choose that type of cherry picking.
Yeah.
But like, obviously there's going to be mistakes with surgeries. There's going to be mistakes with beta block. There's going to be mistakes with a lot of these things, right?
Yeah.
There's already a lot of mistakes with kids in general, especially in America. Right? So one thing that I will absolutely say is that it saves more lives than it doesn't. And that's the proportion that I want, especially the fact that these things can be reversed in a reasonable amount of time. Obviously not the surgery. But I think, obviously not the surgery, but at that point you're 18, fucking luck, right?
Right.
That's your choice as an adult, right? You can fuck up as an adult with surgery if you get like plastic surgery and end up ugly as fuck, right? That's your business.
Yeah.
But like, if we're talking about beta blockers, 4 years is a lot of leeway, dude, especially when you can stop at 3 and be fine.
Is that true? You can actually you can do it for 3 years and then cut it
go
off,
through
and
puberty
you'll
until the ages of
you'll have
24.
no lasting permanent effects.
Not that we can tell. Obviously, we can't look into the future.
Yeah.
But like,
I think as more studies and stuff comes out, I think it's important for everyone to be totally transparent about what the studies say, the science says about this, about suicide rates, about everything related to this. And then I think people should treat surgery as an absolute last resort, treat beta blockers as a second to last resort, and just be honest and open, and also consenting. And I don't think children up until the age of at least 15 at all can consent in a way that we think of consent usually. So
I would agree. I think it's the discussion between the parent and the doctor.
Yeah.
And I don't think the doctor should do it. You know, obviously 13 is where the thing starts. It's more of an emergency thing. Like, this person's going to kill themselves. But 13 is generally when the therapy starts, right? Not the physical therapy, but like the doctor trying to find out if this is a preponderance of behavior, if this is the right treatment. And then, you know, obviously if you start the 4 years, they can reevaluate and be like, okay, maybe this wasn't the right decision now that you're ready to take on your body, if you're more comfortable with that. And then it's even more difficult with people who are like non-binary, right? Who just don't want to be any gender.
Right.
And they're just like, I want to take beta blockers so I don't develop any secondary sex characteristics.
Right. That's tough. But anyway, that's an interesting conversation. A good thing to think about. Appreciate you bringing it up. Hope my answer is not offensive. I don't think it is. I think it's pretty level-headed.
I think it's good to have these discussions with a bit of grace. Like, obviously, we are not all available to all the data that all fucking exists. Like,
right.
There might be some truth to what you're saying. There might be some truth to what I'm saying. I still think trans people deserve rights, and so do you. Like,
well, I think everybody deserves rights. All human rights. Every human should have rights. So
not Jeffrey Dahmer.
Well, I think actually he should have rights, but part of his rights are when you do a bunch of fucked up shit, you get killed or whatever, or imprisoned for life. That's part of it. But yeah, even Jeffrey Dahmer should have rights fundamentally. So, thank you everybody. Good stream, super fun. Let's do it again.